While her friends were enjoying their summer holidays, Cassandra was at home looking at job adverts. She had recently graduated from a teacher training college as a primary school teacher, and therefore dreamed of teaching first graders. But the girl's dream was not destined to come true. School principals, as if conspiring, wanted a teacher with a higher education and at least 4 years of work experience. And where could a 20-year-old girl help? Of course, Cassandra could have gone to university, but her mother, Mrs. Rachel, was against it. Who's going to feed you for 4 years? Me? That's what college is like. 2 years and you're an expert. And there you can take 2 classes to earn more money, she said. Her daughter sighed and took the documents from the university, although she could easily enter. The scores allowed. Now the girl sat and tears of resentment welled up in her eyes. Why doesn't anyone want to know her better, to see how she loves children and knows how to give them knowledge so that they would be happy to learn? We have one place, said the head of the education department, but only not in the city, but in a village 40 kilometers away. Okay, I agree. Cassandra nodded and went home to get her papers. Back at home, Mrs. Rachel swooped down on her like a kite. Daughter, are you out of your mind? What village? Did I run away from it for nothing in the old days? Do you realize how hard it is to live there? You have to fetch water from a well. No hospitals, no shopping centers, no entertainment. I didn't give birth to you so you could go back to the middle of nowhere. And I thought you gave birth to me for happiness. Mum, was all Cassandra said, and went into the bathroom to cry. That's what she always did when her mum hurt her, because there was nowhere else to go. She and her mother lived in a small 1-bedroom on the edge of town. It was all that was left of her father, for whom Mrs. Rachel had run away from her parents' home as a young girl. So Mum was originally from the countryside, and for some reason hated the place where she was born and raised. Perhaps it was because the parents of no good Rachel, as Mrs. Rachel was called in the village, had turned their backs on their daughter after she ran away from home and the locals found out about the birth of the fattened child. Do you know how hard it was for me then? For the 100th time, she told her daughter her story, which is as old as the world. Her father lured me to the city, got me a job on a construction site, and then when he found out that I was pregnant, he packed his bags and ran away while I was at work. Where am I going with a belly? To the village to disgrace myself? My father wouldn't have let me on the doorstep. My mother took his side. I had a big fight with them, so I'm left here all alone. Good, at least the boss took pity on me and left me this flat on the condition that I would stay here to work. 20 years I've been working for this room like a drat horse. And you're going to the country. What do you mean my misery is all for nothing? Mrs. Rachel cried. Her daughter, trying to comfort her mum, came out of the bathroom and hugged him. All right, I won't go to the village. I'll call tomorrow and refuse. The tears quickly dried on Mrs. Rachel's face. She'd got what she wanted. Look for a job, though. We need the money. The next day, Cassandra got up early. She was willing to do any kind of work, as long as it paid well, and luck smiled on her. A prestigious firm urgently needed a cleaner. They paid even more than a mother on a construction site, so Cassandra, without wasting a minute, called the office and arranged a meeting with a recruiter. There was an interview to be had. Cassandra didn't understand what kind of interview an ordinary cleaner could have. And when Cassandra entered the company building, she was struck by the cleanliness of the halls. There were no offices as such. The employees were separated from each other not by walls but by glass partitions. So that's why the salary is so high, thought the girl. There's glass everywhere. It must be hard to keep it all clean. Is that you, Cassandra? A woman in her 40s asked. Yes, the girl nodded timidly, afraid to scare away her luck. You can call me Cassie. My name is Mrs. Vanessa. Firstly, show me what you can do, the personnel officer said. Here's everything you need for that. Clean up my office. I'll give you half an hour to do it. The maintenance room is at the end of the corridor. Mrs. Vanessa pointed in the direction of some storage room and left. Cassandra frantically began to sort through the contents of the bucket. There were sprays, clean wipes, and new mop heads. In short, the company took office cleanliness seriously. Without wasting time, the girl rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning the already tidy office. She didn't leave even the flower pots untouched, wiping them clean of dust. Cassandra then moistened the dry soil of the flowers and snipped off the withered leaves. It was only 20 minutes later when the floor of Mrs. Vanessa's study gleamed with cleanliness. Cassandra was modestly awaiting the framer's decision in a chair in the corner. "Well, Cassie, you're accepted," Mrs. Vanessa smiled. "You didn't fall into my trap. You tidied up the flowers. Well done. You can start work today. You've cleaned my office so thoroughly for nothing. You'll get your uniform from the storekeeper. Mind you, we give bonuses for good work. Our director, Richard, appreciates all labor and respects his staff. Consider yourself lucky." "Who worked here before me?" "As recently as yesterday, Mrs. Molly worked here as a cleaner. But it was hard for an old woman to work. Her health was failing. Yesterday was her last day. I'm glad I found you. Welcome to our company. You can get an advance in a week. I think you need the money." Cassandra was happy. She wished the evening would come sooner and her mother would hear of her good fortune. "It's come to this," a tired Mrs. Rachel said glumly to her daughter as she excitedly told her the news. "Oil workers used to be happy with a job, but now the cleaner's place is happy. Who'd want a cleaner as a wife? Unless it's a watchman. And everything goes round again. No respect from people, no money." "Mum, I'm not going to get married yet," laughed my daughter, "but I'll be paid like a foreman at the factory. That's how big the salaries are there. They have a promising company. They don't hurt people with money, you know." "We'll see," Mrs. Rachel concluded and stared at the magazine. This meant that the mother recognized her daughter's success and was even partly pleased. She rarely praised her daughter at all. Neither for good grades nor for a tidy room did her mother ever encourage little Cassandra when other children's parents bought their children toys or took them to the park. At first, Cassandra took offense, but then she got used to it, and she looked forward to the summer so that she could go to Grandpa Carl and Grandma Annie's house in the country. From the age of 8, Cassandra traveled alone by train. Her mom would see her off at the station, and her grandfather would meet her, arriving at the station in a horse-drawn carriage. The blizzard would snort loudly, the cart would move, and there was no one in the world happier than Cassandra at that moment. "Hello, darling," said grandfather, and hugged the thin Cassandra. "My goodness, you're all skin and bones. Annie will fatten you up. In the meantime, have a pie and some milk." The pies, the size of a man's palm, were still warm. My grandmother carefully wrapped the pot with them in my grandfather's trolley. It took half an hour to walk straight through the forest from the station to the village. During this time, Cassandra had time to enjoy fragrant pastries, fresh milk, and to listen to the singing of forest birds. The village where her grandparents lived was close to the reserve. "Ah, how good it is," exclaimed the girl and looked up at the sky, lying in the cart, thickly covered with fragrant hay. Grandfather Carl chuckled and drove the horse harder to please his only granddaughter even more. "Why hasn't Mummy come to see us again?" Grandfather asked again. "So she's afraid you'll swear. First for running away from you, and then for not coming and letting me go alone. Isn't that right, Grandpa?" Grandfather, though sitting back, Cassandra could feel him freeze and shake his head, meaning he was smiling. "Of course they'd scold you," he said, laughing. "How clever you're growing up. I know you'll be a teacher." "Why, it's easy. I can be a teacher too," replied the granddaughter dreamily. And then there was a meeting with Grandma Annie, and every time with tears in her eyes, her grandmother lamented that she rarely visited them, and that she and her grandfather were alone. "We'll die, and there will be no one to bury us," Grandma once said, sitting on the stoop with her neighbors after the evening milking. "Don't be afraid, Granny, I'll bury you, but don't die now, please. I'm still small and I don't know how to bury anyone. When I grow up, I'll invent a cure for old age, and nobody will die. Don't die yet." The neighbors jumped and laughed. Grandmother wept with laughter and wiped her tears with the tip of her handkerchief. Cassandra did not understand why the adults were laughing, for she had said what she thought. Cassandra had been dreaming about the village a lot lately. She hadn't been to Grandpa Carl's house in 2 years because of her studies and summer internships, not since her grandmother had left this world. A month of work at the company flew by. Cassandra was treated indifferently in the office, not noticing the young cleaning lady who worked hard to keep it clean. Mrs. Vanessa was the only one who respected the new cleaner and periodically wrote out a bonus. But the joy was short-lived. One day when Cassandra came home, Mrs. Rachel met her, and with a calm face, as if nothing had happened, said, "And you have to go to the notary tomorrow. Your grandfather left you the house as an inheritance. Where will he live?" "It's in the cemetery," Mum replied briefly and went off to peel potatoes. "Oh, Grandpa died." "When?" Cassandra exclaimed and felt her heart squeeze with grief. "As long as 6 months ago." "But why didn't you tell me?" "Mum," Cassandra snapped into a scream. "It turns out I didn't even see him off on his last journey. Didn't even say goodbye." "What? You knew and you didn't tell me?" "We were taking exams. I shouldn't have distracted you," said her mother. "There's someone to bury him without us. My father's relatives live in the neighboring village. Go and eat, or it will get cold." Cassandra looked at her mother indignantly and went off to the bathroom to cry. "Grandpa, forgive me," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come. I'm sorry for what happened." At night, the girl slept restlessly. She saw Grandpa Carl and Grandma Annie in her dreams, and they smiled at her and waved goodbye. In the morning, Cassandra woke up all weepy. She got ready before Mrs. Rachel and left for work without eating breakfast. Strangely, Cassandra, who loved to eat, didn't feel hungry, and a feeling of grief filled her and completely took away her appetite. "Why are you so sad? Have you been crying?" Mrs. Vanessa asked. "I'm in trouble. My grandfather has died. Now I have to go to the notary's office and I don't have time after work. So my grandfather left me a house in the country. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for him when he was unwell." "If you have to, then go," the boss stroked the girl's head. "You'll clean the office tomorrow morning." "Thank you," Cassandra looked at Mrs. Vanessa gratefully. Cassandra was returning home as the full owner of her grandfather's estate. At home, her mum was waiting impatiently for her. "So, have you inherited?" When she saw her daughter nod, she continued as if nothing had happened. "It turns out that, because of our proximity to the reserve, our house is expensive. Can you imagine? We'll sell it, add on and buy a 2-room flat. We'll have enough left over for a summer house. Is that a good idea?" "I won't sell my grandfather's house," cut off her daughter. "It's dear to me, and I am guilty before my grandfather, so let our native nest stand and wait for us." "I'll never set foot in this house," Mrs. Rachel exclaimed. "My father has not forgiven me to the last, and now I shall never get his forgiveness. And to throw my pregnant daughter out of the house without knowing how she is doing, and to leave her without help. My resentment is too strong." "That's not true, and stop lying," Cassandra replied, looking her mother squarely in the eye. "You yourself didn't want to go back to the village. Grandfather asked about you all the time. I've told him many times. And he helped us. Every year he gave me money to go to school. He sent me remittances for all holidays and birthdays. So don't say that. And I won't sell the house, so you know. It's a memory of my grandparents, of my childhood. Only there I was happy." Soon the whole office was discussing that Cassandra was the heiress to a rustic shack in the middle of the woods. Many scoffed, calling her a millionaire. The one who tried the hardest was sales manager Scott, a heavy-set, balding middle-aged man. "So, millionaire, are you going to your country villa for the weekend to twist bulls' tails? And you must be a rich bride in your village, full of piles of manure instead of dowry. Brooms come in droves." "Yeah, stacked in packs," Cassandra muttered and continued cleaning. But Scott didn't stop there, and continued to banter with the girl to the laughter of his colleagues. Suddenly froze and clutched his heart. Everyone thought he was joking and laughed. Only Cassandra was not amused. She realized from the pale face, the blue lips, and the sweat on Scott's full face that the attack was real. The man collapsed and lost consciousness. Cassandra dropped the mop and ran swiftly over to the man, beginning to unbutton his shirt. "Call an ambulance. Open the windows. Spread out," she loudly commanded to the dazed staff. Cassandra then began to give the victim indirect cardiac massage and CPR with confident movements. The colleagues watched in amazement and obeyed everything the cleaner told them. After a couple of minutes, Scott came to his senses. "Thank you, Cassandra." "Be quiet. You're not allowed to talk. Here, take a pill under your tongue." The arriving EMTs praised Cassandra for her smooth, competent work. "You're a lucky patient. To have such a smart girl around," the doctor said, "saved your life." Cattle looked guiltily at Cassandra, as he was carried on a stretcher to the emergency vehicle. When the girl returned, she was applauded by the entire office. From that moment on, no one said anything offensive to her anymore. On the contrary, now everyone respected Cassandra and no longer called millionaire. 2 weeks later, Scott was discharged. The first thing he did when he showed up for work was to go to the den where the cleaning lady usually rested at lunchtime. "Hello, my savior," exclaimed the man and gave her a big hug. "I'm indebted to you now, and this is for you." The man handed Cassandra a huge bouquet of roses and a box of expensive chocolates. "Thank you. No one has ever given me flowers before, especially such beautiful ones." The joyful girl dipped her face into the velvety petals. "Then I wish you find a fiancé who will shower you with flowers," Scott smiled. "Oh, I don't have time for suitors right now. I have to work." Cassandra waved a blushing Cassandra's hand. "Then again, I want to take a night course at the Institute, so I don't have to take time off work." "Good for you. I've been meaning to ask you, where did you learn first aid?" "Oh, it's an old story. I wanted to be a nurse when I was a kid. I even signed up for a course, but I couldn't finish it. That's just the way it is. But I learned emergency care to a T." Cassandra was awkwardly silent, and Scott realized that he touched on a sensitive subject. He had no choice but to politely bid her farewell and leave. And the girl was left alone with her thoughts, as now she remembered the face of her ex-fiancé Walter, twisted with anger. He was 5 years older than the 19-year-old Cassandra. "What do you mean you're pregnant?" he yelled when Cassandra, overjoyed, informed him that she was pregnant. "What's your due date? Go and get an abortion." "I don't want kids. What are you staring at?" "What were you thinking?" "How could I? But you said you loved me and we'd get married soon." "Don't be ridiculous. Would I marry a beggar like you? I'll take you to the hospital now. Take care of your womanly affairs yourself. Understand?" Walter shoved the shocked Cassandra into his foreign car and dropped her off at the door of the antenatal clinic. Then he disappeared from her life forever, moving to another city and changing his phone number. When Cassandra told her mother about her situation, she behaved no better than Walter. "So you want to do what I did? Are you crazy? You have no profession, no husband? Do you think your grandfather would accept you if you brought him a bastard child? No, he won't. I feel like history repeating itself." During the night, Cassandra felt sick. She had to call an ambulance. As a result, she lost the baby that neither her father nor her own grandmother wanted besides her. "Don't cry," Mrs. Rachel stroked her daughter's head. "You'll have more children, all in good time. Don't think I'm mean and cruel. I feel sorry for the baby. It's not his fault his daddy was a scoundrel, and then I'm not ready to be a grandmother. I'm sorry, my daughter." So it was the first and last time Mom apologized to Cassandra. Because of a miscarriage and a long depression, the girl never finished her medical studies. The grief and betrayal of loved ones shattered a fragile dream. The colors of life seemed to fade, leaving the world gray and pale for her. That's what happens when you lose faith in the beautiful. Cassandra was brought out of her thoughts by Mrs. Vanessa's voice. "Cassandra, Richard is asking for you. He probably wants to thank you for saving his colleague." "Okay, I'm coming." She had never seen the headmaster so close, only from afar when he got out of the car and into the lift, and so tall, businesslike, and unapproachable. Now this powerful man wanted to see her, Cassandra, an ordinary cleaning lady. Her palms were sweating with excitement, but she got up, changed into her clothes, and headed for the lift under the curious stares of the office staff. Richard only had the appearance of an unapproachable businessman, the owner of a large trading company. In fact, he was a man of deep family and kindness. Despite his 33 years, he was a widower and raised a 7-year-old daughter, Veronica, in whom he had a heart. The girl had a talent for drawing, so from the age of 5 she studied at an art school. "Daddy, at school we were asked to paint a landscape. Let's go to the countryside," Veronica once suggested to her father. "I want to draw a forest and a river." "I'm sorry, darling, but I can't go with you. I have a lot of work." "Do you want Janet to take you?" Richard replied. Veronica nodded dejectedly, but added, "I want to go with you. I don't want to go with that Janet. She's mean." "Don't say that, my daughter. I promise I'll buy a house in the country, and we'll go there every weekend," Richard reassured her. Janet, Richard's girlfriend, was actively trying to become his wife. She liked power and money in him, but not his child. However, the cunning woman realized that only through Veronica she would be able to finally bind the promising groom to herself. But Janet did not love the girl at all. Cold heart warmed only jewelry and foreign accounts with millions, not children's drawings for holidays. "Of course, I'll take Veronica out of town. No problem, darling," Janet murmured, leaning against the man, pushing little Veronica out of the way. "And I've seen such a lovely gold watch. I can't even sleep. It's so pretty." "All right, buy it for yourself. My credit card's on the table. And don't forget to take Veronica out of town. It's very important to her, especially now you have a car." "Yes, darling, it's a great birthday present for me. You should have seen, darling, how my friends envied me when I drove up to the restaurant in a brand new foreign car." But Richard wasn't listening to Janet. He was reading something on his laptop. Work did not leave him even at home. Janet never took Veronica to the countryside, citing the breakdown of the new car. She was indifferent to the girl who had lost her mother so early. "So when the girl grows up, then I'll persuade Richard to send her to some closed school abroad to keep her out of the way," Janet told her friend. "You're not his wife, so I'll listen to you," Irene grinned, jealous of Janet's new car. "It's only a matter of time. You'll see, I'll have Richard for a husband, and soon everyone will be calling me Mrs. Cooper. Just pretend I love his nasty, whining daughter. I can't stand her. I hate children. I don't know why everyone's so obsessed with them." But Janet couldn't fool little Veronica. The child's sensitive heart felt the indifference of the beautiful woman with her ice-cold blue eyes. Veronica tried to explain to her father that Janet was not who she thought she was, but it was ineffective and ended in tears. Richard thought that his daughter was just capricious and jealous, and Veronica was even more upset. It's so frustrating when someone close to you doesn't understand you. Cassandra stopped in front of the principal's office and fixed her hair. She had never interacted with someone like Richard before. The likes of him seemed unattainable, inaccessible and mysterious to her. As luck would have it, she'd overslept today, so she hadn't had time to wash her hair, so she'd worn what she could find: jeans, a simple sweatshirt, and sneakers. And then Cooper called me into his office. "May I, Richard?" Cassandra plucked up her courage and walked into the principal's office. "Ah, Cassandra, come in." Richard smiled at the sight of the frightened girl. "Don't worry, I've called you here on an important matter. But first I want to thank you for your selfless act. You saved a man. That's worth a lot. That's why you deserve a reward." "I don't need anything." Cassandra blushed. It wasn't difficult at all. Richard looked at the girl in surprise. You couldn't tell from the look of the poor cleaner that she didn't need anything. It reminded him of Janet and her constant demands for expensive gifts. Pushing the unpleasant thoughts away, Richard continued. "The conversation is actually about something else. I hear you inherited a cottage near the reserve. The thing is, my daughter needs fresh air and a place where she can stay and paint landscapes. I'm building a cottage outside of town, but the construction won't be finished for a while. I have a proposition. Sell me your country house. I'll pay twice the market value. What do you say?" Cassandra was not prepared for this turn of events, so she could only squeeze out one thing. "Richard, I'm sorry, of course, but the house is not for sale." Now it was Richard's turn to be surprised. He wasn't used to being turned down. "But why not? You could buy a flat in the city with that money, and more than one." "It was Grandpa's house. It's the only place I was ever happy. To sell it would be to betray the memory of my grandfather and grandmother." "It's your decision, and I respect it," Richard said. "Think it over. The offer is still open." So when Cassandra told her mother about the principal's proposal, she was furious. "Who do you think you are? What do you need this wreck for? This rich man is offering such a huge sum of money, so take it. It will solve all our problems and cover our debts. I can't stand your stupidity anymore. Get out of my sight." And the daughter went to the bathroom again, not understanding how she could give her home to someone else. And on the other side of the city, in a luxurious mansion, shed bitter tears little Veronica. She had failed to paint a landscape and had been given an F. It cost Richard a great effort to calm his daughter. The next day, Cassandra wore her best dress and the new shoes she'd been saving for going out. And for good reason. The secretary called and asked her to come up to the principal's office. Well, that's it. They're going to fire me, Cassandra thought, and went in to see Richard Cooper. Did you call? I didn't call you. I invited you, Richard smiled. I need your help. Cassandra, who had not expected such a turn, froze in place and opened her already large eyes wide. It made Richard laugh, and he involuntarily admired the natural beauty of the girl, untouched by the hand of a plastic surgeon. Don't worry, Richard said, suppressing a laugh. I have a favor to ask you. When are you going to the village? I was going to go this weekend. Why? Help me out, Cassandra. Take my daughter with you. She's a young artist. She's been asked to paint a landscape. And I'll give you a car and a guard and 2 days' groceries. My daughter's name is Veronica. She cried all night last night. I don't know what to do to keep her busy. My daughter is always sad, and I don't have time. The partners are coming. I have to work with them all weekend. All right, Cassandra agreed, but I have one condition: we take the train. That way Veronica will have fun and see the beauty of the fields and rivers. But we could use a guard. Someone has to carry the bags. In the morning, an expensive foreign car drove up to the house. Richard got out of the car and sat Cassandra in the car next to his daughter. Veronica looked curiously at her new acquaintance, but did not dare to speak first. Hi, Veronica, my name is Cassandra. She took the initiative. We're going to visit me in my village. Have you ever traveled by train? No, she shook her head, and I've never been to the village. Are there cows there? Of course you and I will taste their milk, the girl smiled. She liked this little girl with a surprised face and big honest eyes. Do you even have lambs? And lambs and goats and hens and a cockerel. He's going to wake us up in the morning. That's great. Daddy, let's hurry to the station, or we'll be late for the village, Veronica shouted impatiently, which made the adults laugh. Cassandra did not notice the guard sitting in the front passenger seat while she was talking to her little friend. However, it spoke of his professionalism, to be inconspicuous and necessary at the same time. It was only when they got to their seats on the train that Cassandra saw the accompanying guard. He was a tall young man of about 25 with a serious face. Brian, the boy said as Cassandra looked at him questioningly. I'm Cassandra, the girl began. I know, the guy replied, making it clear that he was on important duties. Cassandra hesitated, not sure what to talk about with such a serious man. They probably would have traveled the whole way in silence if it hadn't been for Veronica, who was commenting with delight on everything she saw outside the train window. Oh, look what black birds are flying, the girl exclaimed to the whole carriage. They're eagles, they're really beautiful, Cassandra corrected her. Brian smiled imperceptibly. The passengers listened, eager to hear everything the child was saying, which enlivened the dull atmosphere. Cassandra, look at the ocean beneath us, and at the sailing. That's the reservoir, Veronica, and in the distance, fishing boats. From that moment on, Brian softened. He even allowed himself a sandwich and tea from a thermos, though he had said it was not allowed. By the end of the trip, the young people got to know each other better, telling each other some of their lives. It turned out that Brian became Richard's security guard right after his service in the Special Forces. The chief knows my commanding officer. He found out I needed a job after the army to help my parents, so he took me in. And Veronica, some 3 hours later, was already looking at kind Cassandra with loving eyes. That's what happens when a child doesn't have a mom. He looks for her in others and finds her with his heart. The girl laid her head on Cassandra's lap and fell asleep peacefully. The little girl never sleeps during the day, Brian said, surprised, and there's a lot of noise, and she doesn't care. I feel sorry for her. It's been 5 years since her mother died. No amount of wealth can help such grief. And Janet, who's trying to marry the boss, is a snake. She insults the girl when nobody sees her, humiliates and abuses her. Veronica's a little girl. She doesn't understand, but I hear and see everything. So why don't you tell Richard? I'm not supposed to, Brian frowned. My job is to keep the family safe, not to get involved in family squabbles and gossip. And you keep your mouth shut if you want to keep your job. Cassandra nodded, but she felt uneasy. When the three travelers reached the house they were looking for, They admired the beauty of the nature surrounding it. "Wow," said Brian. "What a beauty. And the air is clean, you can't breathe it." In silence. "I like it here too," said little Veronica. "I've never seen so many trees." "What, you haven't been to the river yet? Let's go to the bank and see how nice it is there." "Do you know what kind of landscape I'll draw here?" said the girl with inspiration. "No one will have such a picture. Everyone drew in the park or in the countryside, but I in the village. Can I run down the hill?" "Of course, do what you want. My friend, you can even go barefoot. There's no rubbish here, no cars, no bottle glass or other dirt. Just earth and grass, and you can wash your feet." "Hooray," shouted little Veronica, dashingly threw off her lacquered shoes and with a squeal of pleasure ran across the green meadow. After lunch, which Brian helped to prepare, all three of them took a walk around the village. Veronica cuddled with cute, curly-haired lambs and played with the neighbors' chickens and ducks. And during the day, the girl had tanned and no longer looked like a pale city child as before. Her joy was overflowing and infectious to Cassandra and Brian, who already had a spark of mutual affection between them. "Look, women, Cassandra has come from the city," the village gossipers whispered. "And what a handsome husband, and a cheerful daughter. Well done, Cassandra, for visiting Carl's house. She hasn't given up on her homeland." "Hello?" Cassandra said. "Hello, would you have some milk and sour cream?" Veronica has never had country food. "Oh no, my dear," said the neighbor. "Carl has done us so much good in his time. Why don't we give his granddaughter a treat? We don't need money. Here, bring your husband and your daughter some presents. Eat and remember us with a good word." "Oh, but they—" "Thank you, Ankie," Cassandra said. "Next time I'll bring you something from town. Maybe you need some medicine? Just write a note." The neighbor was pleased. Cassandra didn't tell the truth, or else there would be gossip in the village, and she didn't want that. The 2 days of the weekend flashed by like a blink of an eye. Cassandra was glad she hadn't sold her grandfather's house. "Oh, I hate to leave," Cassandra said sadly. "I don't either," Brian confessed suddenly, and looked at her in a special way. "We'll come next weekend," Cassandra suggested, especially since Veronica hadn't painted the landscape yet. "I had no time. I had to collect cones for the samovar, feed the neighboring chickens, bathe in the river, and sweep the floor. Then I went to the bathhouse. Oh, so much to do, so much to do." Veronica waved her hand, which made the adults laugh. "Look, soon you'll be a country girl," said Cassandra, laughing. "So what?" replied the girl. "I like living here. I must bring Papa here." So when Richard met his daughter at the railway station, he was amazed at how his child had changed. Now it was a cheerful and healthy girl. Not only that, but Veronica had brought him some fragrant raspberry pies, especially for him. Father was touched. For the first time in a long time, his daughter looked happy. "Thank you," he said to Cassandra. "Expect a bonus for your work tomorrow." "You don't need anything. I did it for Veronica and myself. I've wanted to come to my native land for a long time. Next weekend we're taking you with us. Don't argue. Work can wait, but my daughter will grow up. She'll miss you." "Okay," Richard smiled. His heart felt fondness for this simple and sweet girl, whose only jewel was her smile. From then on, Veronica, Sandra, and Brian spent every weekend in the village. Sometimes Richard came to visit them, having escaped the hustle and bustle of the city. Here he rested his soul. No artificial foreign hotels could compare to the wildlife and warm atmosphere that reigned in the village house. Soon Brian confessed to Cassandra that he had a crush on her, and Cassandra was happy. Only Janet was unhappy. "Can you imagine? My Richard often goes away with that insolent hillbilly," she complained to her friend. "Not only that, but Veronica almost calls her mom. I'm sure she'll take my Richard for her own cleaning lady." "So go with them. What have you got to lose?" Irene suggested it. "Of course I am." Janet was indignant. "What haven't I seen? I'm not going to walk through mud in galoshes. I have to do something, or Veronica will be out of my control. And she's the key to Richard's heart, which means marriage. I'm not giving up that easily. That cleaning lady is going to be my bitch." Meanwhile, an unsuspecting Cassandra brought Brian to her house. "Mom, I'd like you to meet my boyfriend, Brian," she said cordially and embarrassed. Mrs. Rachel only greeted Brian dryly and acted inhospitable all evening. The boy sensed this and an hour later he was leaving. "I guess your mom didn't like me." The boy said goodbye. Cassandra blushed. She was ashamed of her mother's tactless behavior. When Brian left, a scandal broke out. "Mom, why did you treat Brian so rudely? What did he do to you?" "Exactly nothing," Mrs. Rachel replied indifferently, "and he's nothing. He's just a poor man like us. What you need is a rich man like your headmaster. Then we'll be out of this poverty." "What are you talking about, Mom? He's got a fiancée. I love Brian. He's a good bloke. He'd do anything for me." "So you can't get enough of a good man," concluded her mother, "and a fiancée is no obstacle. It can be moved. You're a good-looking girl, so you're quite eligible for the rich man's wife. Besides, his daughter loves you. Be smart." "I won't." "You should marry a rich man yourself," Cassandra exclaimed and slammed the door and ran out after the boy. Across town at Richard's mansion, an intrigue played out with the participation of Janet and her friend Irene. While an unsuspecting Richard was working in his office, Janet had encouraged Irene to play a foul game against the hated cleaning lady. When the man went down to the dining room, the two scheming women were already waiting for him. "Can you imagine, darling, what Irene just told me?" Janet began to weave her web. "Janet, I don't want to hear your gossip, spare me," Richard said. "But it's about your daughter," Janet exclaimed loudly, showing that she was worried. "All right, go on," Richard said interestedly. "In the village they say that this cleaning lady Cassandra is having fun with your guard, and the girl is running around the village unsupervised, begging to be fed," Irene whispered and looked back at Janet, who nodded approvingly. Richard was furious. He immediately remembered how the neighbor had come and brought food in a basket. He couldn't leave it like that. Richard left the dining room without eating. After calling Brian, he waited in fury for the guard in his office. He didn't know what pissed him off more, the fact that Veronica had been left unattended or the fact that Cassandra was the one having fun. "What were you doing in the village? I hired you to guard my daughter, not to have an affair with Cassandra. Janet told me everything. I have witnesses." The guard froze in surprise and couldn't say a word. "What? Nothing to say. You have no shame, no conscience." "Wait a minute, Richard. There must be some mistake." Brian began to justify himself. "Cassandra and I did not do anything like that. We were with Veronica the whole time. Ask her yourself." "I'm not going to question my own daughter. She's a little child. She'll say anything you've taught her. Janet's words and witnesses are enough for me." "Your fiancé is a snake." Brian couldn't take it anymore. "She can't stand Veronica, and you can't see any further than your own nose. Janet has talked to Cassandra and me, so we must have done something to disturb her. You better watch out for that sly one." "How dare you talk about my favorite girl like that? You're fired. Get out of my sight." Brian was angry and hurt by the chief's injustice. He slammed the door so hard that a frame with an ornate picture of Janet fell from the wall and shattered. Brian packed his things and left. Janet was jubilant. The witness to her real relationship with Veronica had been permanently eliminated. The only thing left to do was to get rid of the cleaner. That evening there was a knock at Cassandra's flat. It was the taxi driver, who dropped off a very drunk Brian. "Sign here," the cabbie said cheerfully. "The customer gave me your address." After paying the taxi driver, the landlady dragged Brian to the sofa. The boy was fast asleep. "Well, what did I tell you?" Cassandra's mom was enjoying being right. "Your Brian's just a drunk and a poor man. Why would you want him like that? I'd rather be alone than live with an alcoholic." "Brian doesn't drink," Cassandra objected. "Yes, of course he does," Mrs. Rachel said mockingly. "I know him. Something bad must have happened." That night, Cassandra and her mother slept in the same bed, as the sofa was occupied by a guest sighing in his sleep. Towards morning, she was awakened by the sound of the door closing. The man was ashamed that Cassandra had seen him like that. He vowed to himself not to take another drop of alcohol in his mouth. When she arrived at the office, Cassandra went into Richard's office, but the director was not there. She rang Brian to ask what had caused him to be in such a state last night, but he didn't answer the phone. "What on earth?" Cassandra said aloud. "What's going on?" What was going on was that there had been a huge scandal at Richard's mansion, and it was caused by a little girl. I want to go to the country with Cassandra and Uncle Brian." "You're not going anywhere else with them," her father said in a harsh tone. "Why not?" Veronica was stunned, tears welling up in her surprised eyes. "Janet said that they are bad people. I won't explain anything else to you. You are too young for such things," Richard said sternly. The daughter did not expect such rudeness from her father and cried loudly. "Janet is the bad one, but Cassandra is the good one. Throw Janet out. She's hurting me." But Richard was too angry to listen to the child's voice. "Go to your room and don't cry," Richard told his daughter. And Veronica left. She went up to her room, packed her rucksack, took her favorite teddy bear, and ran out of the house, quietly closing the door behind her. There was no one to stop the little girl, for Brian had been sacked. When Janet saw the gate close behind her through the window, she grinned wickedly. The deed was done. She was rid of everyone Richard loved and respected. "Get the cleaning lady on the phone," Janet ordered Mrs. Vanessa in a commanding tone as she rang the office bell. "Listen up. This is your boss's fiancée speaking to you. Are you still getting under Richard's thumb? Then from today get out, you cheeky girl. We don't need your services anymore." Cassandra turned pale. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Vanessa asked. "Janet sacked me." "No, you didn't. Richard was in the office today, and he didn't give any such orders. Janet's always minding her own business. Don't mind her." But Cassandra was uneasy. Her fears were confirmed when she received a phone call from Richard. "Cassandra, Veronica's missing." "How did this happen? Where was Brian?" "He doesn't work for me anymore for having an affair with you instead of watching my daughter." "Who told you such rubbish?" exclaimed the girl. "We had no such thing in mind, so that's why he got drunk." "Well, we'll talk about that later. I'm going to go find Veronica. Stay in touch." "All right, thank you. I've got the whole town on alert. But they can't find her," Richard said quietly. "It's all my fault. Call me if you need anything." Cassandra began to think frantically about where the child might go. She remembered Veronica telling her about a place in the old part of the park. It was where she liked to draw and daydream. Brian knew the place because he used to take her there for walks. "Pick up the phone," Cassandra whispered. "I need you so badly right now." "Hello," Brian's voice was so familiar. "Brian, Veronica's missing. She's run away from home," Cassandra screamed. "Are you at work? Wait for me. I'm on my way." Cassandra and Brian found Veronica in her hiding place. She was sitting on her rucksack, cuddled up with her teddy bear, crying bitterly. Seeing Cassandra, the girl exclaimed, "Cassandra, you found me? I love you so much. Uncle Brian, come back. I'm so bored without you. And Janet's bad. It's all her fault. She made Daddy angry." "Your daddy isn't mad. He was just tricked and confused." Cassandra knelt down beside the grieving child and hugged her tightly. Brian had already called Richard, and forgetting his resentment, told him that Veronica had been found. And 10 minutes later, the happy father was apologizing to all three of them. They worked things out quickly, and Richard made a decision. He took Cassandra aside and said, "Will you, Cassandra, agree to be a wife to me and a mother to Veronica? I have liked you for a long time." Oh, Cassandra's legs gave out in surprise, and she had to grab Richard's hand. She thought that if she accepted, she would become the richest woman in the city and make her mother happy. But on the other hand, would Cassandra be happy, for she loved Brian? "I can't accept your offer. I love Brian, and I love Veronica too. I don't know what to do." "Thank you for your honesty, Cassandra." Richard seemed to have expected that answer. "I'm not wrong about you. I suggest you become Veronica's nanny and life coach, and I'm going to make Brian my head of security. You'll live in my mansion. There's plenty of room for everyone, and then we'll build you your own house. What do you say?" "I'm in." Cassandra was touched to the core. She put her arms around Richard's neck and ruffled his hair, but then she pulled away and blushed. It was so sweet and sisterly that Richard laughed. He realized that strangers could become family if they had soulmates. Richard walked over to Brian and talked to him for a long time about something. Then they both turned to Cassandra and smiled. She was standing there holding a sleeping Veronica in her arms. The little girl was smiling in her sleep. When Jana saw 2 cars drive into the mansion courtyard through the window, she knew her case was bad. Fearing Richard's wrath, she quickly packed the jewelry and money into her suitcase and went out the back door. No one else saw her, nor did they want to. Brian and Cassandra's wedding took place on the beach, just as the bride had dreamed. Richard and his daughter were the guests of honor. Veronica was by Cassandra's side and never left her side. "You won't get rid of us. We'll have to be family friends," Richard said to the groom, laughing. "I would be honored to be your friend," the groom replied. And only the bride's mother was crying quietly, realizing how much harm she had done to the person she loved. "Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for giving birth to you without a father and not giving you what you dreamed of," said Mrs. Rachel, hugging Cassandra. "No offense, Mum. I'm not offended. You've had a hard life," she smiled through her tears. "Thank you for life." Helene reluctantly wandered home because she had been caring for her fading mother-in-law for a year and barely overheard. "Helene, shall we relax after the work week? Go to a cafe? Go shopping?" asked a full of cheerful woman at her colleague, coming out of the passageway of the furniture factory. "I would very much like to, but I cannot," answered Ellen. "And all with your mother-in-law tortured. You've had a cross to bear, Helene." "I'm not complaining. Who else could?" "All right, grace my streetcar." Ellen, an accountant at the furniture factory, ran to the bus stop to catch the streetcar. She couldn't find a free seat and got on the back of an old carriage. "With your mother-in-law, you're tormenting yourself." Helene couldn't get her caring colleague's phrase out of her head. It was about her 75-year-old mother-in-law. Ellen had been widowed a year ago and had the burden of caring for her husband's mother. Her mother-in-law, Lexi, was a difficult character. All her life she had worked in management positions and was used to being in control of everything. But a few years ago, her health began to fail. She began to walk with difficulty and had a microstroke. And the death of her son finally took its toll on Lexi. She could move around the apartment, but it was almost impossible for her to go outside, to the store, without help. And at home there were cases when the woman could not stand on her feet and fell on the way to the kitchen. Therefore, Ellen tried never to be late at work and hurried home. It could not be said that she did this with any particular enthusiasm. Lexi's difficult temper, control mania, and sharp tongue made Ellen very uncomfortable. The older woman always knew best where things were, where Ellen needed to go, and what time to be home. Ellen felt like she was trapped in a tower with a dragon, and there was no telling when she would be able to get out. There were days when she just didn't want to go back to her mother-in-law's house. She could hardly contain her irritation and anger, lest she lash out at the sick woman. But Ellen realized that Lexi had no one left but her, and that taking care of her was the best memory of her husband. Ellen wasn't particularly cheerful this day either. She realized that now she was going to have to go through the routine of reporting on the previous day and listening to Lexi's instructions. When she got home, Ellen opened the front door, walked into the hallway, and heard her mother-in-law talking to someone on the phone. "You wouldn't believe how lucky everything turned out," Lexi said excitedly. That was the tone of voice she would use with her longtime friend Annie. Ellen didn't go into the room and decided to wait for the conversation to end. Close. "Now I'll sell the apartment successfully and live out my last days with dignity. And my sister-in-law is free from the case. Signed the contracts today. I have all the documents in hand." At this point, Helen shuddered, alarmed, and began to listen even more attentively. What black realtors? You don't understand anything. Everything is legal, I tell you. Do not come to me. Stay at your place." Lexi was raising her voice more and more. They sometimes fought with her friend, but Ellen had never heard her mother-in-law talk like that before. Annie could use a harsh word, too. She worked in the legal department of the same company Lexi ran. Annie was retired now, but still interested in legal news, always warning her friend against new dubious schemes. Ellen heard her mother-in-law hang up the phone and walked into the room. "Good evening, Lexi." She said a quiet hello. "Ellen, hi. Listen, come here." The mother-in-law sat in her favorite chair, holding out some papers to Ellen. "Read it. What is it?" Helene asked, perplexed. "This is our happiness." Helene took the papers in her hands. On one of them was written a deed of gift. Ellen shuddered and continued reading. "I, Kaylin Lexi, being of sound mind and sober mind, donate the apartment, which belongs to me by right of ownership, to the organization." Ellen couldn't read any further. Eyes wide open, she looked at her mother-in-law. "What are you doing?" "Well, and you too, or what? Sit down. I'll tell you everything." Lexi began. "A young man and a girl came to see me this afternoon. They represented some kind of social organization, which is engaged in helping the elderly and providing care for them. Anyway, they offered me a deal. I sell them the apartment. And they put me in a boarding house where I'll be cared for around the clock. You understand, Helen, I'm getting weaker as the years go by, and soon you won't be able to handle everything with me. And this way you'll go to live with yourself." "I don't understand." "What's not to understand?" "I sold the apartment for a little less than it would have cost on the market. For that, I get a place in a boarding house, a private room, a private nurse, and a view of the forest. Isn't that wonderful? Then why does it say deed of gift?" "Because it's faster. A sale, or whatever it's called, takes a long time to process. It's a lot of paperwork. This is just one signature, and that's it. But don't worry, it's all taken care of. Here, I took a receipt from them, where they agree to pay me $3 million. Lexi held out another piece of paper to Ellen. Ellen looked at it. It was a handwritten receipt. "You know," Ellen started hesitantly, "I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think receipts are issued in these cases." "Do you understand much?" The mother-in-law raised her voice again, now at Helene. "What, you wanted this apartment for yourself so badly? Don't worry, I don't need that $3 million. It'll be yours anyway." "What do I need your money for? What are you saying?" Helene started to justify herself. "I'm worried about being cheated." "It's all legal. What organization were these people from?" "Young Old Age, I think." Ellen took out her phone and quickly typed the name of the organization into a search engine. The first link started with the word scammers. She began scrolling through dozens of reviews, and each one told of schemes to scam the elderly. "Lexi, they're scammers." "Is that what they say on your internet?" Her mother-in-law wouldn't listen to her daughter-in-law. "It's all about writing nasty things." "Look, they put their address here," Lexi said. "If you want, you can go check it out yourself." Ellen took the sheet with the address, got dressed, and quickly left the apartment. The office of this organization was located in the heart of Swan's Town. Ellen had to take the streetcar again. The woman was very worried, and not because of the apartment. Ellen had her own apartment, where she and her husband lived. The children had grown up and moved to New York. The apartment was empty, and Ellen could always go back to it if she needed to. It wasn't what she was afraid of. Lexi might just not be able to survive something like this. Losing the apartment would be a real blow to her. And that wasn't the worst-case scenario. There was no telling what these people would want to do to Lexi to avoid taking care of her. Ellen didn't want to think about that. Yes, her mother-in-law wasn't the easiest person to deal with, and her daughter-in-law had suffered a lot because of her. But still a family member. Despite everything, Ellen treated her well. You just realize that everyone's temper is different, she thought. Especially when Ellen and her husband had just started their relationship. Lexi had helped them out a lot. That very empty apartment had been bought by Ellen, not without her involvement. So Ellen was determined to get to the bottom of the situation. Getting to the right address, the woman saw a small business center. Entering, she asked the janitor for the office number and went up to the 3rd floor. It was a shabby building of some factory that had been hastily converted into office space. Reaching the right door, Ellen knocked and went in. "The workday is over," the woman sitting behind the desk said in a nasty voice. She was putting papers in a bag and was clearly leaving. "It says on the door that you work until 7. It's 6:55 p.m. Ellen said sternly. "All right, what do you got there?" "Your company scammed an elderly woman today, my mother-in-law." "Young lady, we're not scamming anyone. It's the law." "No, don't give me that bullshit. Your employees said they were a social organization. Is that right?" "We are a social organization," the woman interrupted Ellen for the second time. "A social organization for scamming the elderly. I've read your reviews. I demand that you immediately cancel all contracts." Calm down, girl, calm down. We conclude all contracts in accordance with all legal requirements, so no one will cancel anything here. Then I'll file a police report against you. Right. You're not the first, so to speak. First they watch their old people, then they run around complaining. You don't even hide the fact that people like you want to get rid of their elderly relatives. How dare you? Ellen could not believe her ears. The woman unashamedly told her what their scheme was designed to do. What? How dare I? We're only making things better for you. What do you think, we don't have a boarding house? We're just trying to steal your naive relative's apartment. No, we do send old people to a place where they'll get better care than yours. It's just a whole apartment to pay for it. Well, what do you want? Business like this, times like this. I'll see you in court, Ellen said stiffly and walked out of the office. She couldn't believe this was happening to her. Fraudsters sitting in the center of Swan and not even hiding their dark intentions. What good would it do if Lexi was actually sent to a boarding house? She wouldn't live there long anyway, knowing she'd been scammed. No, these people had to be dealt with at any cost. So Ellen went to the police. Never in her life had she ever filed a report or gone to court. But now she was ready for anything, so strong was her anger toward these people. The police station was not far from the office center. Ellen reached it on foot in just 10 minutes. Once inside, she saw a sign that read Duty Station. Ellen went to the window under the sign that said Front Desk. Hello, I'd like to file a report. Take the form, write it down. The employee answered in a machine-like manner, holding out the form. He was on the phone and didn't even look at who was in front of him. Ellen spent a long time writing the statement, choosing the right wording. She wanted the police to get to the bottom of this as quickly as possible. When she had filled out the form, she handed it to the officer on duty. He finally took his eyes off the screen and began to read. Okay, name, address, phone number. Oh, young aging. Do you already know something about this organization? We do. We've had 3 of these applications this month. How are they being handled? It's not going well. We've already checked this company, everything's clean. So you're wasting your time trying to do something. This case is a dead end. What do you mean, lame? Are you refusing to take my statement? Come on, citizen. We have no right to refuse to accept it. We'll just file it in a folder, and then all you have to do is wait. Helene left the office in a depressed state. She didn't know what to do next. She didn't want to go home for other reasons. She just couldn't say those words to Lexi that she had been cheated and there was no chance of justice. After reaching home, Ellen leisurely made her way up to the floor and entered the apartment. Usually Lexi was watching TV loudly, but this time there was silence in the room. What's up? The mother-in-law asked quietly. We'll figure it out, Ellen whispered. So it was a hoax after all? Lexi was usually a long-winded person, but eventually she could be persuaded. This was one of those times. I guess so. Lexi covered her face with her hands. The old fool. Come on, Lexi. Ellen ran up to her mother-in-law. You and I are not alone. There are several reports on this office, so they'll definitely look into it. That's how I continued the story. Of course, Ellen hid the words of the front desk clerk from Lexi. What to do next, she didn't know yet, but now it was important to support her mother-in-law, so she had to make up some reassuring words. You're like a child, aren't you? Lexi lamented, and I was happy about it. I told you we'll figure it out. Did they give you a timeline? Yes, they said that in 2 weeks we should pack up and move to the boarding house. So we have plenty of time. 2 weeks, Helen nodded. In fact, she was thinking, I have to think of something in time. At least I'll lie that I got the money from them. The next morning, Ellen was awakened by a phone call. Usually, even on weekends, she got up early. But last night she couldn't sleep for a long time, so she lay awake until 10 in the morning. Glancing at the screen, she saw an undefined number and was startled. For some reason, she was suddenly sure that it was the same scammers calling. Ellen thought for a while whether to pick up the phone or not. In the end, she decided to answer. Eileen Vasilievna? A stern voice asked. Yes, who's calling? My name is Swan. I'm an investigator. I've read your statement. I was wondering if you could come down to the station today. Yeah, what time should I be there? Right now. Just bring all the documents, contracts, and receipts. Helene quickly got ready, prepared her mother-in-law's lunch, and rushed to the station. She felt a sense of hope. It meant that at least the application had been taken into consideration and not just thrown into a folder. She didn't bother telling Lexi she was going to the police station, just that she was going on business. She wanted her mother-in-law to think as little as possible about the situation, even though she realized that was impossible. Especially since it was already 11 days from now, she would most likely have to leave. Ellen entered the now familiar building and approached the duty officer. There sat another employee who told her which office to go to. She walked down the long hallway almost to the end and saw a sign that read Senior Investigator Captain Swan. She knocked on the open door. Hello, may I be Helen? You called me today? Good afternoon. Come in and have a seat, replied the investigator's stern baritone. He was a stately man in his 40s with graying on his temples. He was actively typing something on the computer. Ellen hesitantly sat down across from him, and after about 20 seconds, Captain Swan turned his attention from the computer to her. I'm sorry, there's so much to fill out, the investigator said as he began to look for something on his desk. Aha, here. I have familiarized myself with your statement. I'll tell you at once. The situation is not new and rather sad. In neighboring cities, this scheme has long been known. 3 months ago, these scoundrels moved in here. I was told by the duty officer that there have already been 3 reports. Captain Swan twirled some papers in his hands. Yes, that's right, here they are. But I'm a little more interested in yours than the others. Apparently, your mother-in-law was more meticulous. So the crooks had to do a little more paperwork with her. May I see the contract and the receipt? Sure. Ellen handed the papers to the investigator. Interesting, Swan said, studying the documents. But I expected more, of course. What did you expect? That there would be some circumstances written into the gift contract analyzing it. You just wrote in the statement that they assured in writing about all the nuances of the transaction. But the promises there about board and care and such. And that information can't be contained in such documents, which means it becomes invalid. Well, no, these guys got it right. What about the receipt? The receipt is interesting. The other victims were all verbal assurances. But your Swan looked at the statement. Lexi asked for some kind of written commitment. Did the receipt have any validity? Sadly, no. A receipt is for a loan. This is just a promise to hand over money. So any court will send you away with a piece of paper like that. But either way, it's new. So we have at least a handwriting sample and an employee's signature. So if you don't mind, I'll scan this paper, said the investigator. Sure. And what should I do with my mother-in-law? I'm a straightforward person, so I will not hide. Prepare for the worst. Even if we catch on to something, it will take a very long time. You guys have 2 weeks to leave too, right? Well, we can't do anything in 2 weeks. There's practically no evidence. Everything is done according to the law. Have you checked the boarding house? Maybe they poison old people there so they don't have to deal with them. Of course, we didn't check 5-star hotels, but everything is legal. The conditions there are minimal. So if there's another place for Grandma, you'd better take her there. But they promised her personal nurses care nature. Isn't that slander? Can't they at least be prosecuted for that? Misinformation in advertising is an administrative offense, not a criminal offense. And a verbal promise. It would be hard to prove anything, and there's no need. Our task is to bring this case to bigger crimes. But with this kind of data, we're not going to be able to do that anytime soon. So you're suggesting we just give them the apartment and leave quietly? You already gave it to them? Not you. Well, your mother-in-law did. So you're in someone else's apartment right now. I understand your feelings, but I'm being as frank as I can and telling it like it is. I'll try to do everything I can. But I can't promise anything, especially in the near future. Hopefully they'll make a breakthrough soon and we'll be able to catch them by the tail. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Ellen walked out of the investigator's office. There was no point in hoping for quick help from the police, so she had to act on her own. She took her phone and began to scroll through the list of contacts. Ellen did not have any acquaintances in the authorities or the bar. The only person who had anything to do with law was Annie, her mother-in-law's friend. Without thinking, Ellen dialed her number. Annie, hi. This is Ellen, your friend Lexi Callan's sister-in-law. Hello, Lenachka. I didn't recognize your voice right away, Annie replied good-naturedly. You know, we had a very unpleasant story with the apartment. Yes, I overheard you and Lexi talking yesterday. Anyway, you were absolutely right in your concerns. What a stupid situation. It's a common way to cheat, and I've told you about people like that many times. Why didn't she listen to me? Why don't I know what's gotten into her? They must have influenced her somehow. They have special techniques, like hypnosis. Distracting, misleading. And that's it, fooling our old ladies. Sounds like it. I don't remember Lexi agreeing to anything quickly. But I take it you're not just calling to share your concerns. Yeah, you're right. I just got off the phone with the police. They say it's a very complicated situation, and it's unlikely anything will change in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, Lexi has to move out. Of course, I'm not putting her in a boarding house. I'm taking her back to my place. But you realize what a blow this is going to be for her. I do. Luda's been very down lately. So yes, she doesn't need this kind of stress. Come to my place now. I have my son at home. He's a lawyer. Maybe we can work something out together. Ellen thanked Annie for the offer and rushed to her. In general, they did not see her mother-in-law's friend very often. While her husband was alive, they met only at general celebrations. After his death, a little more often, Annie lived nearby and once a week came to visit her friend. But at that time, Ellen was usually not at home. But even in those rare encounters, Ellen had formed a very good impression of the woman. Annie was a little younger than Lexi and had a completely different personality. Sometimes Ellen wondered how such two completely different women could be friends: the nervous, bossy Lexi and the good-natured, simple Annie. They were both quite emotional and could always stand up for themselves and their rights. When Ellen heard that Annie was willing to help, she was glad. Yes, she had no plan, and it would be foolish to expect an older woman, even though she was a lawyer in the past, to have one. Nevertheless, Ellen felt much calmer at heart. She quickly made her way to Annie's house, who lived a few blocks away from Lexi. Once she got to the 3rd floor, she rang the bell. The door was opened by a man in his 40s, wearing a cardigan and white shirt. Good afternoon. I'm here to see Annie, Ellen said a little shyly. Yes, come in, we're waiting for you. Ellen entered the apartment. I'm Christian, Annie's son, a lawyer. Nice to meet you, Helene replied and went into the room. It was furnished in a Soviet-style luxurious way: a full-wall closet, many sets, a huge crystal chandelier, and 2 wide leather armchairs. Annie sat on one of them. Sit down, Lenachka. The woman pointed to the neighboring chair. Christian also came into the room and sat down on the chair next to it. Thank you for seeing me, Ellen said politely. Of course not. How could you not? Annie replied cheerfully. Let's get down to business. Do you still have the papers Lexi signed, or did you give everything to the police? No, just copies. I have everything with me. Ellen pulled a folder out of her bag and handed it to Annie. She handed it to Christian without even looking at the contents. We have a professional sitting here. Let him sort it out, said the old woman sneeringly. Actually, I'm not a professional, Christian said, studying the documents. I'm a criminal lawyer and I don't know much about civil contracts, but everything seems to be in order at first glance. I'll take a picture and send it to a colleague. Sometimes Ellen wondered how such two completely different women could become friends: nervous, bossy Lexi and good-natured, simple Annie. At the same time, they were both quite emotional and could always stand up for themselves and their rights. Hearing that Annie was willing to help, Ellen was overjoyed. Yes, she had no plan, and it would be foolish to expect an older woman, even though she was a lawyer in the past, to have one. Nevertheless, Ellen felt much more at peace. He specializes in that kind of deal. And the receipt? Take a look at it, please, Ellen asked. It's the same. I can't say anything. I can only give it to a handwriting expert. But I don't think that would do us any good, said the lawyer. I've just been thinking, Annie began to say. Actually, we have two ways, civil and criminal. We don't have any leads for the criminal one at first sight. Although if the investigator was interested in this case, it's for a reason. In the civil way, we can demand to challenge this contract, to recognize the deal as invalid. We can't, Christian interrupted my mom. I was immediately answered by a colleague. In general, we don't have any clues to go the civil way either. The scheme is known not only to us. These swindlers used to work in a neighboring town. He writes that they were not approached from any side, and sued, and in the pre-trial order tried to solve. All to no avail. Somehow they forced these poor old ladies to sign all the documents, and that's it. But that's all the better, Annie said cheerfully. Excuse me, why better? Ellen was puzzled. And that we have only an option to catch them in a criminal offense. And in the case of a successful resolution of the issue, we will not only be able to return the apartment of your mother-in-law, and also for a long time to put the whole gang. It sounds, of course, tempting, but you said yourself that there are no leads. That's just at first glance, Annie said. We need to find out as much as we can about how they work. I can't believe that someone like Lexi could sign off on everything so calmly, can you? She didn't sign it quietly. Even the investigator said that these social workers usually do without a receipt, a verbal promise Ellen remembered. It's still strange that they managed to calm her down with one single receipt, which has no legal force whatsoever, Christian objected. She didn't know that the receipt was null and void, Ellen objected. My dear, you remember Lexi well, don't you? Is it enforceable? It's not. You can't get away with that. That's true. The lawyer obviously remembered the character of his mother's friend. So I think we need to get them out in the open, Annie concluded. How do we do that? Ellen didn't understand. You have me, Annie, an old, lonely woman exclaimed. She glanced at Christian. Well, almost lonely, the perfect victim for this gang. We've got to get them on me somehow. They're coming after my apartment. So we're going to try to catch them on something. Mom, wait, are you being serious right now? Are you serious? Christian asked. Seriously. If anything, you'll be there for us. But Annie stepped in. Ellen, it's really, really dangerous. Maybe they won't hurt you, but what if they do use some kind of hypnosis, and you give them the apartment too? Well, you'll be around to interfere. Christian, I think, can organize everything for a good surveillance. But I don't know, the lawyer hesitated. Do you have any better options? Annie asked. No, Christian shook his head. If it were another woman sitting in your place, I'd be the first to suggest baiting. That's just it. So that's it. I don't want to hear it. It's settled. Why don't we get the police involved? Samantha suggested it. No, they won't help, Christian said. They're so busy, they don't care about our suspicions. Then how are we going to control the situation? What if we just can't intervene in time? We'll install video surveillance in the apartment, the lawyer replied. Do you have any special equipment? No, they only install hidden cameras in soap operas. We work a little simpler. An ordinary cell phone will do as a hidden camera. We'll make a video call. We'll put one cell phone behind the sideboard, for example, so that only the camera sticks out. And from the other phone we'll watch and listen. Simple, legal, and effective. Wow. Helene was surprised by the simplicity of Christian's idea. What did you want? Annie asked. They, the lawyers, are under strict supervision now. You can't make a move, but still. Ellen was worried about her mother-in-law's friend. Why don't I at least call the investigator? He seems to be a smart man, she suggested. No need, Helene, Christian said firmly. You see, they have everything by the book there. Surveillance, warrants, they'll ruin the whole operation. And in general, most likely they'll send us away. Ellen sighed heavily. She'd lived by the rules all her life. She'd never done anything so amateurish. Never had she or anyone around her had any problems with crooks or the police. So the woman felt like she was in a soap opera. only she had to play one of the main roles, not of her own free will. "But let me ask you, how are we going to point them at me?" Annie asked. "Here in the contract there is an address and phone number." Ellen pointed at one of the papers. "Maybe you could call, say that the neighbors found out about them, and you, as a single woman, really need care." "That's a great idea, Ellen. Christian, give me that piece of paper." Annie pulled out her cell phone, dialed a number, and waited for a connection. Unavailable. "That was odd. Maybe they don't work on Saturdays?" Ellen asked. "I don't think so. Every client is worth their weight in gold. Such offices should take calls 24 hours a day. It's something else. Maybe I scared them off." Ellen remembered her trip to the company yesterday. "When I was there yesterday, I promised them I'd call the police. So they got scared and decided to run out of town." That's a possibility, Annie thought. What if they hadn't had time to pack for the day? Christian joined the conversation. Maybe the phone was disconnected. But they hadn't had time to leave the office yet. They wouldn't want to lose a client who'd come to them on her own. "What do you mean?" Ellen asked. "I mean that we have to go to them now." Annie didn't let her son answer. All three of them quickly got ready and went down to Christian's car. 15 minutes later, they were already there. "There she is." Look, Ellen pointed to a woman with a bag coming out of the office center. "I talked to her yesterday." "Then what are you looking at?" "I'm going to give you a master class," Annie said, and was about to get out of the car. "Mom, wait." Christian stopped his mom and went into the glove compartment. From there, he took out a cell phone and called it from his own. "Put it in your pocket, just in case we're listening to you." Annie took the phone and got out of the car. Not many people would have agreed to take such a gamble, and there was no telling what moved her more, the desire to help her friend in trouble or the interest to take part in a dangerous case. Annie quickly caught up with the woman, stood for a moment, took a breath, and called out to her. "Excuse me, please, what happened?" she asked. The woman turned around. "I'm so embarrassed to ask this," Annie said in a pitiful voice. "I think I'm lost. I left the house to go to the management company. Anyway, I've gotten really old. Do you have your cell phone with you? Have you called your family? Do you have a phone? What's the use of it? I don't have any relatives. They've moved away and left everything behind," the woman thought. "What am I going to do with you? Do you even remember your address?" "I remember the street, not so much the house." "Why are you like this?" "Let me take you to the street. Maybe you'll remember the area." "Oh, my daughter, you're a lifesaver." "Thank you." "Wait, I haven't done anything yet. What street is there, Mayakovsky? We'll be there in no time." The woman took Annie under her arm. "Come on, my car is not far away." Helene and Christian watched everything from the car. "What are we going to do?" Ellen was worried. "Let's drive carefully behind them," Christian said, changed gears and carefully drove off. The woman put Annie in the car, got behind the wheel and drove toward Mayakovsky Street, where Ellen's mother-in-law and her friend lived. "Do you think she took the bait?" Christian asked. "I think so," Helene replied. Christian kept his distance, following the con artist's car. This lady didn't look like she had much heart. She wouldn't just help out like that. "She smells a profit," Helene said. The phone was silent for 10 minutes. Helene and Christian even began to worry a little. Maybe the connection was broken, Helene suggested. But driving into Mayakovsky Street, a woman asked Annie, "Well, do you recognize it?" "I recognize the neighborhood, my daughter, I do." "Let me walk further on my own," answered Annie. "No, let me take you to the entrance," the woman insisted. Annie began to explain to the woman how to get to her house. A couple minutes later, the car was there. Ellen and Christian parked in a neighboring yard. "I'm not going to let you go so easily now," Annie said thoughtfully. "Come in and I'll make you some tea." "I'd love that," said the woman, obviously realizing that she had found her latest victim in this city. They walked slowly up to the apartment. Annie pretended to be a frail old woman, so she tried to move as slowly as possible. In the apartment, she sat the woman on a chair, moved the phone from her jacket into her pants pocket so that Ellen and Christian could hear everything, and went into the kitchen to make tea. "So what you said, no one from your relatives is looking after you?" the woman asked. "They've all gone away. They don't care about me." Annie was making up a story as she went along. "I never asked for anything. I always did everything myself, to the store, to the clinic, and to get money. But in recent months, something completely bad has become. Many people sometimes refuse. Now I've got a headache." "What's your name, my daughter?" "Isabel?" Annie asked. "I think you are very lucky to have met me today," the woman replied. "Yes, you've been a great help to me. I don't know how to thank you. And that's not the only reason. Now you're going to want to thank me even more," Isabel said. Annie gave a puzzled look on her face. The con artist continued. "The thing is that I work in a social organization. We are engaged in helping lonely old people, providing them with a dignified old age." "What a good girl you are. How do you do it?" Annie asked. "It's simple. We offer you a place in a wonderful boarding house on the banks of the river overlooking the forest. Good repairs, caring staff, and most importantly, you will not have to make any monthly payments. You will have a personal nurse, constant assistance, checkups in general, everything you want." "You say that so beautifully, but I don't have any savings. Everything goes on medication," Annie sighed. "You won't have to pay anything, I'm telling you. But you will benefit from it, won't you?" "I'll tell you straight, of course there will be benefits. First of all, such organizations are helped by the state. There are some benefits for charitable activities. And secondly, tell me, what do you plan to do with your apartment?" "I don't plan to do anything. I'll wait until I die. It'll go to one of my children and grandchildren." "Any of the same kids who left you here? It's one thing for them not to visit you or help you." "Come on, they're still kids. That's the way it is. Old people die, leave their possessions to their children. Whatever they are," said Annie. "I've been thinking about selling this place myself for a while now. Why would an old woman need so many rooms? But I was afraid to deal with those realtors." "If you do the paperwork yourself," Annie said thoughtfully. "Of course we will. And I'll be honest with you, that's where our second profit will be. A few % of the sale we will send to the accounts of our social organization. That money will go exclusively to help similarly lonely old people," said Isabel. "Well, at the end of your life, you can do a good deed." "Come on, what end?" "Think of it as the beginning," Isabel smiled. "Did I manage to please you, my child?" "And what do I have to do?" "Sign some papers." "Come to your place?" Annie asked. "You don't have to go anywhere. Our employee will come to you today, tell you everything in detail, prepare the necessary papers, and show you what you need to sign. All you have to do is to prepare your passport, and we will do the rest." "I'm very happy for you. You're very lucky today." "When is he coming?" "Right now." "No, you'll be home from 5 to 6. "Where would I go?" "Of course I will." "That's when a young man from our organization will come to see you." The woman said goodbye to Annie and left. Christian and Ellen waited until she left the entrance and got out of the car. They had 3 hours to prepare the operation. They went up to Annie's apartment. "Mom, you're a piece of work." Christian marveled at Annie's acting. "Mastery, you know," replied the old woman modestly. "Listen, this is all wonderful, but do we have a concrete plan of action?" Ellen asked. "That's what we're going to do now," said Christian. He walked around the room, looking at every corner of it. "I think we'll set up the camera here." He pointed to the center section of a long cabinet, where the Venetian crystal stood. "I've got a white phone case right here. I don't think it will be visible. Then we'll need to move the chair a little. And the other one too." Christian moved the chair half sideways with a slight movement. Then he walked over to a small black table and placed it exactly centered between the chairs. "Now the table and chairs will be visible on the camera," Christian said. "Mom," he said to Annie, "we'll have to make sure that all paperwork is done at this table. And in general, try not to leave the camera's field of view. I understand, Annie nodded. Tell me, will you use real documents? What if they have time to register something? Ellen was worried. Do I have a choice? I haven't made any other passports for myself. And it's dangerous to make forged copies, you know. It seems to me that the most important thing in our business is authenticity. They can't even think that something's gone wrong. Don't worry about me. I'll definitely be able to read the document before I sign it, said Annie. All right, let's say everything goes as it should. Ellen decided to imagine a possible situation. He'll come in and start telling you about his services. You will pretend that you are very interested, that you are impressed. Then he will pull out a contract and ask you to sign it. It won't be so fast from here, Lenotchka Annie interrupted her. Then I'll start torturing him with all sorts of questions. Are they not crooks? How much will they sell the apartment for? Will they show any other documents? Christian has joined the conversation. Then you can move on to personal questions. Start pestering this person like the wife, like the kids. Jump to the discussion of the latest news. In general, Ellen, the task of the mom will be to make him irritated. You see, when a person is annoyed, he has less control and can start making mistakes. Exactly, agreed Annie. And the climax of the play will be the signing of the contract. He'll get his paper, and I'll turn from an annoying old lady into an experienced lawyer. I'll ask him a direct question. Why does it say here that it's a gift contract and not a sale contract? He'll start making excuses. Christian made a slight movement to put the chair half sideways. Then he walked over to a small black table and placed it exactly centered between the chairs. Now the table and chairs will be visible on the camera, Christian said. Mom, he said to Annie, will have to make sure that all paperwork is done at this table. And in general, try not to leave the camera's field of view. I understand, Annie nodded. Tell me, will you use real documents? What if they have time to register something? Ellen was worried. Do I have a choice? I haven't made any other passports for myself. And it's dangerous to make forged copies, you know. It seems to me that the most important thing in our business is authenticity. They can't even think that something's gone wrong. Don't worry about me. I'll definitely be able to read the document before I sign it, said Annie. All right, let's say everything goes as it should. Ellen decided to imagine a possible situation. He'll come in and start telling you about his services. You will pretend that you are very interested, that you are impressed. Then he will pull out a contract and ask you to sign it. It won't be so fast from here, Lenotchka Annie interrupted her. Then I'll start torturing him with all sorts of questions. Are they not crooks? How much will they sell the apartment for? Will they show any other documents? Christian has joined the conversation. Then you can move on to personal questions. Start pestering this person like the wife, like the kids. Jump to the discussion of the latest news. In general, Ellen, the task of the mom will be to make him irritated. You see, when a person is annoyed, he has less control and can start making mistakes. Exactly, agreed Annie. And the climax of the play will be the signing of the contract. He'll get his paper, and I'll turn from an annoying old lady into an experienced lawyer. I'll ask him a direct question. Why does it say here that it's a gift contract and not a sale contract? He'll start making up all kinds of excuses. That's what he'll get caught on, Christian said. After all, everything will be recorded on camera. Very interesting. Ellen listened carefully to the plan. But how are you going to get out of signing the contract? You're not going to sign it, are you? Of course I won't, Annie replied. I'm going to pretend I have a heart condition. I'll ask for an ambulance. I think at that point he'll get scared and run away. He doesn't want any more witnesses. And he won't want to explain to the doctors who he is, how it happened. But that's not the whole plan. Let's say by some miraculous miracle, he gets me to sign this piece of paper. There will be 2 cups of tea on the table. After all, a gracious hostess is obliged to offer her dear guest a drink. After signing, I will awkwardly tip the cups onto the paper, and with a slight movement of my hand, the contract will turn to mush and rags. But eventually you'll figure something out and keep him out of the driveway with the contract, Ellen said. Just don't overdo it. And Tulloch Christian nodded. Well, Helene, are you calm now? Yes. Impressive, Annie said cheerfully. Good. Then you and Christian will need to be down to the car by 5 o'clock and watching it near the driveway. And I'll probably go to Lexi's in the meantime. She's been sitting there alone since this morning. But I hope you realize that it's better not to tell her anything, Annie said. Of course I understand, Ellen replied and walked towards the exit. Leaving the driveway, she headed toward Lexi's house. Ellen was filled with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, it was very important and exciting for her to see this through for Lexi's sake. But on the other hand, she was very worried about Annie. At first glance, this older woman gave the impression of a confident person who was not afraid of even meeting with crooks. However, Annie was by no means young. There were too many things that could go wrong in this plan. 10 minutes later, Ellen was already in place. The TV was back on in the room, and Ellen realized that her mother-in-law had recovered a bit from yesterday. "Lexi, how are you feeling?" Ellen asked thoughtfully. "Good, Ellen, why do you ask? But it seemed to me that you were feeling pretty bad about yesterday." Ellen was surprised by her mother-in-law's question. "You know, I don't remember yesterday very well," Lexi said with the same calmness. "What do you mean you don't remember? What about the condo deal?" "No, I remember that. I'll be living in a boarding house soon, Ellen, finally free of me." Maybe Ellen didn't realize what was going on right away. Her mother-in-law had never had a blackout before, not even after a stroke. "You're not dizzy? Is your coordination okay?" "I'm telling you, I'm fine." Ellen went into the kitchen, closed the door tightly, and dialed the number of her mother-in-law's friend. "Hello, Annie. There's something wrong with Lexi. She doesn't remember much about yesterday. It's just bits and pieces. She's just glad she got a place at the boarding school." "What? I thought so," Annie exclaimed. "Lexi couldn't just give up like that. They're putting something in, but it's all the more interesting. How is she feeling overall?" "She seems fine otherwise." "Well, that means I won't die. Don't worry, Ellen, it'll work out." Annie hung up. Ellen became even more worried. Now, the danger to the elderly woman's health was not a perceived danger, but more than real. Ellen could not leave this situation so easily, and, after a little thought, dialed the number of Investigator Swan. "Comrade Captain, hello. It's Ellen. We met this morning." "Yes, you remembered something." The captain recognized Ellen immediately. "No, there's a detail that's come up. Basically, my mother-in-law has been having memory lapses. I've never seen her do that before. I think she was drugged last night." "Okay, this is interesting. Send her to the clinic for a blood test. I'll make arrangements to get it done quickly. But that's not all. The thing is, my mother-in-law's friend Annie and I have decided to, how shall I put it, increase the evidence base. And today the same organization is coming to her to sign a contract, and the whole process will be captured on camera. Of course, this woman will not sign any contracts." "Are you out of your mind?" Swan interrupted Ellen. "What kind of amateur hour is this? Are you playing detective?" "Comrade Captain, we had no choice. We're running out of time. The apartment will soon be taken away, and because of this you jeopardize the life of another person." The captain was silent for a while. "Okay, all right. What time is this event?" "A member of this organization should be here between 5 and 6. "Damn, that's so soon. I'm out of town right now. There's no way I can make it by 5. I'll try to make it by 6. What's the address?" "Mayakovsky, 35, apartment 12. I wrote it down. "Wait for me. Be careful." "So maybe you'll send someone else to us?" "No, it's impossible." "On what grounds?" "In short, try to delay this process as long as possible." Ellen was a little calmer after that conversation. "Now, Annie, is there any insurance in the form of Investigator Swan?" Ellen looked at the time. The clock read 15. She decided she needed to take Lexi to the lab. If the test results showed that there were some substances in her blood, it would be an ironclad reason for the police to intervene. Without thinking, Ellen hailed a cab and entered the room. Lexi. Remember, the district doctor once told about a special blood test for complex diagnosis of anemia? Ellen decided to latch on to the recent words of the medic who came to her mother-in-law's house. Of course, I remember, it still costs some huge money. I hope you're not going to suggest I get it done? Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But you don't have to pay a lot of money for it. There's a promotion going on right now, free for the elderly. Until what date is the promotion? Till today. May. Ellen knew Lexi wouldn't pass up an opportunity for a free test she didn't really need. 5 minutes later, the cab pulled up and Ellen and her mother-in-law headed to the clinic. There was almost no traffic on a weekend day, and in 15 minutes the car was there. Helene took Lexi to the clinic, put her in a chair in the hallway, and went to the front desk. Very quietly, so that her mother-in-law would not hear anything, she asked, "Hello, where to come for a blood test?" "What kind?" strictly asked the girl. Ellen could not think of a wording for different substances. "Are you what, from the investigator?" Did not immediately understand the girl. "You should have said so right away." "We were warned. Go straight down the hall to room 14. Ellen and Lexi reached the lab. "Hey, why isn't there a line for this attraction?" Unprecedented generosity, wondered the mother-in-law. It's Saturday, the last day, and the elderly do not work, so they all went and did it on weekdays. Ellen found this excuse convincing. Luckily for her, the healthcare worker who took the test was silent, and Lexi, surprisingly, didn't ask any unnecessary questions. After a quick analysis, they went out into the hallway to wait for the results. Literally 10 minutes later, the health worker came out and silently held out a piece of paper to Ellen. "But what is it?" Lexi asked. "I can't see anything without my glasses." Ellen ran her eyes over the incomprehensible numbers. Everything seemed to be normal. Finally, she reached the last line, where it said in bold letters, "Not found." "Yes, everything's perfectly normal," Ellen said. "Come on, I'll call a cab." Ellen didn't know whether to be happy or not. It seemed that now there was no need to worry about her mother-in-law's health or Annie's. But now it was unclear what to pin on these con artists. What to show investigator Swan. Everything depended on today's operation, which was less than an hour and a half away. The cab made it to Lexi's house just as quickly. Ellen took her mother-in-law to the apartment. "I'm going to call Annie and brag," Lexi said proudly as she walked into the room. "Maybe you shouldn't." Ellen hadn't had time to warn Annie about the examination, and calling her mother-in-law might cause some misunderstanding. She just wouldn't be able to make it, since today was the last day. "Yeah, you're right, you should have called sooner. Why do they give such late notice of their events?" Ellen didn't answer that question, but only warned Lexi that she would have to go out again tonight. "Where do you go so often?" "I always stayed at home on weekends, and you run here and there?" her mother-in-law asked incredulously. "Yes, I just have a friend came from New York. We studied together at the Institute, so I show her our city." "Yes, she will be very interested in our city after New York," Lexi commented wryly. "Well, go on, don't worry about me, I'll make my own dinner." Ellen was glad her mother-in-law was in a good mood. After waiting another half hour, she packed up and headed to Annie's house. She and Christian had agreed to meet a little before 5. When she reached the house, Ellen saw that Christian was already sitting in the car. He looked very tense. His mother was about to let the crooks into the apartment. Ellen opened the car door and got into the front seat. "What's up? How's Lexi doing?" "My mom told me you called her," Christian asked excitedly. "She's fine. I took her to forensics. They didn't find anything." Christian breathed a sigh of relief. They sat in silence for a couple of minutes before Helene decided to alert her lawyer. "I called the investigator after all. He said he could probably make it by 6. "What? But I asked you, Ellen, would it interfere with the whole operation?" "What was I supposed to do? Was Lexi's life in danger?" "I had to call to arrange the forensics. I didn't know they wouldn't find anything. I warned Annie, too," Ellen said. "Okay, maybe you're right. Christian thought about it. It was already 5 o'clock in the evening. Ellen looked at her cell phone, which was attached to the front of the car. There was a panorama of Annie's living room. The woman was sitting quietly in a chair reading a newspaper. Christian watched the entrance to the driveway carefully. 10 minutes had passed, but no one from the social organization seemed to have gone in there. After waiting another 5 minutes, Ellen decided to break the tense silence. Christian, tell me, I don't know why I even wanted to ask this question. I guess it's important to me. Did you know my husband, Emmett? Ellen wanted to break the awkward pause and could think of nothing better than to talk to Christian about her husband, who had passed away a year ago. She knew almost nothing about his friends. She had only seen some of his colleagues at work, and that was it. Of course, we were friends when we were kids. Our parents lived next door to us. Yeah, and my mom still lived next door to each other. And then what happened? Why did you stop hanging out? We grew up, we all became so important, so serious. Everyone's busy with business, families. There was no time for friendship. Well, I guess that's what happens to a lot of people. Then I went to work in Los Angeles, and I only came back here once in a while. I didn't have much contact with anyone here except my mom. It took me a while to find out that Emmett was gone. My mom called only 2 days later, so I didn't even have time to fly to the funeral. How long will you be here now? Ellen asked. No, the law firm where I worked there went bankrupt, and I decided to come back here. I've been in private practice here for 6 months now. I thought LA would be boring, but as you can see, Christian grinned. I'm not bored. It just pays less, but it's cheaper to live here, of course. Yes, we're a lot of fun, Ellen said. My mother used to tell me about you sometimes, by the way. What do you say about me? Christian asked interestedly. Helene was also interested. Yes, she did. The amazing thing is that the daughter-in-law not only did not abandon her mother-in-law, but also began to live and take care of her. Especially since I remember Lexi's bossy personality from childhood. No way. She's all alone. I couldn't do anything else. You're right about the temper, of course. It can be tough. But she's done so much for me and Emmett in her time. I'll be grateful to her for the rest of my life. So I try to ignore her barbs and just do my duty. You have a heart of gold? I can't imagine my ex-wife helping my mom if something happened to me. You know, when Emmett was alive, I couldn't imagine living with Lexi either. Ellen smiled. But as you can see, it's okay. It's tolerable. So you shouldn't be talking about your ex-wife. No, it was clear from the beginning. Christian smiled too. He wanted to continue, but he thought it would be inappropriate to discuss his ex-wife with Helene. You can't determine in advance how a person will behave in a difficult situation. If someone had told each of us 3 days ago what we were going to do now, no one would have believed it. But the way life turned out. I would never have believed that I would be trying to catch criminals, Ellen said. Neither would I. We lawyers tend to be a little on the other side. We're not supposed to catch criminals. We're supposed to defend those suspected of crime. The one person I would certainly never doubt is Annie. She'll come to the aid of anyone, anytime. Yeah, Mom's doing great. She's hanging in there. I'm worried about her youthful enthusiasm, of course. But that's what she lives for. I think without adventure, she'd lose interest in life. You must have gone into it? Christian asked. Lawyering, even in criminal cases, is not an adventurous occupation. I might have gone into it, but I'm a much more free in life, replied Helen. I'm more like my dad, I guess. Mom did not immediately accept my choice to become a lawyer. She kept saying, how can I defend criminals? And what did you say to her? I said what any professional lawyer would say. We're not defending criminals, we're defending justice. A man can be wrongly accused of something he didn't do. That's where we come in. But very often criminals are arrested at the scene of the crime. Do you still fight for these cases? For example, would you defend the people in this office who took Lexi's apartment? You're asking very difficult questions, Ellen. Christian replied. I apologize if I said something I shouldn't have. No, it's okay. That's exactly the question I can't answer. Of course, I won't defend these scoundrels. The thing is, I have a personal interest here. After all, these people cheated my dead friend's mom, and they're going to cheat my mom. And when there's a personal interest, we're prohibited by attorney ethics from pursuing this matter. Ellen leaned back in her seat and thought. But not about lawyer ethics, but about Christian. She liked his way of answering questions, his calmness and judgment. She found something in common between Christian and her husband Emet. And for a few seconds Ellen even thought she was beginning to like him. But these reflections were interrupted by Christian himself. "Helene, look," he said and pointed toward the entrance. "A young man in a suit and a leather bag is standing by the intercom. I think that's our client." "Maybe just a neighbor," Ellen suggested, looking at the broadcast from Annie's apartment. "In any case, we'll find out now." A few seconds later, they heard the intercom ringing through the phone. Annie got up from her chair and walked out into the hallway. "Hello, I represent the social fund to help the lonely," came a voice. "Here is the edited text with names and cities replaced." "Our employee told us all about you," came a voice from the microphone of the phone in the closet. It was hard to hear separate phrases in the hallway, but they were audible in the car. Annie did not delay the swindler at the door and immediately invited him into the room. "And I've been waiting for you for 20 minutes. I've been on my nerves." The woman again entered the image of an infirm, restless old woman. "But I'm sorry, I have a lot of things to do. I have to go around and help everyone." The employee explained his delay in a kind tone. I understand. I guess you have a lot of people like me?" "Quite a lot. But you can't create a place for everyone in the boarding house, you know. So you're very lucky." "I don't know why I'm so lucky," Annie pretended to be confused. "Oh, that's right. I didn't even offer you tea, but I will refuse to despair." Annie went into the kitchen. Christian and Helene watched the swindler closely. A simple-looking young man with glasses and slicked-back hair began to look around the apartment. At one point he came close to a cabinet, probably to evaluate a set. Ellen already thought that now he would notice the cell phone with the camera on, and that would be the end of the operation. But no. After looking at the set for 10 seconds, the young man switched his gaze to something else. "Here I am." Annie came into the room with a tray with a teapot and 2 cups. "What a thoughtful hostess you are." "It's a lot of work," the man muttered. "But why not take care of such an expensive guest? What did you say your name was?" "I'm Carl, junior assistant manager." "Why are you such a mature man?" "Just a junior assistant." Annie began to implement her plan to psychologically pressure the con artist. "Why not? I'm still a young man." "Is that what you think?" "Youth is a moment, you know. Before you know it, you're old. So you have to work harder. That's what I'm doing." The con man's tone became less kind. "Let's get down to business. I need your passport. Here, I've prepared everything as you asked." Annie pointed to the table where the passport was lying. "Have a seat, so we'll fill it out," she invited. The man sat down in the chair, took out some papers, and began to leaf through the passport. "Uh-huh. Annie Swan, so she's the one. And you, Carl, why are you standing there? You want to check my martial law?" "Oh, come on. Why would I want to check your marital status?" Carl tried to smooth things over. Most likely, the man wanted to get some information about the elderly woman's relatives. "And why did you look through it then?" Annie kept up with Carl. "I was looking for a residential address. I needed an exact address." "So you could have just asked me what you were looking for." "What? I don't know my address." I'll tell you what. Annie was beginning to talk professionally to the con man. The camera poorly conveyed the expression on Carl's face, but from his gestures it was clear that he was tired of what was happening. "Annie, I'm begging you. Don't give me a hard time. This is an important document, by the way." "I'll take a look at it." The woman snatched the sheet out of Carl's hands. "Wow, a deed of gift. I'm giving you this apartment as a gift. Please don't rush things." The man took the document back. "It's the right thing to do. Don't worry, you won't have to wait for the deal to be finalized. And in 2 weeks you'll already be in the boarding house." "Oh, but very clever. Only I heard on TV that they can register a sale in 9 days now." "You should watch less TV." The man was very annoyed. "Why are you yelling at me? Grandma's old. She doesn't understand everything at once. I'm just filling out some very important documents, you know. And here you are with your unnecessary comments. So where are the documents for the apartment? You know, like the registry or the certificate. Annie persisted. Isabel told me I only need a passport. Do you think we're going to get an apartment without her papers? She probably just forgot to tell you. I don't know where those documents are. Ellen was distracted by the phone ringing. It was Investigator Swan. She took the call with a trembling finger. Yeah, she's here. Oh, great. There's a red Opel in the driveway. You see it? Yes, please get in. Helene dialed the phone and spoke to Christian. The investigator will be with us in a moment. A couple minutes later, the back door of the car opened and Swan got in. What's going on here? He asked angrily. We're watching the apartment. Ellen pointed to the camera feed. Wait a minute. I think the best part is coming up. In the apartment, meanwhile, the man was emotionally explaining what the documents for the apartment looked like. After 5 minutes of explanation, Annie gave up. I remember, they're in the other room. Now, Carl, wait, I'll get them all for you. Annie stood up and leisurely shuffled into the other room. The man glanced at her, then took a dark vial out of his bag, opened it, and dribbled a few drops into the woman's cup. Christian and Ellen didn't immediately realize they had to run to save Annie, but the investigator reacted instantly. Okay, let's go quickly. All three of them got out of the car and ran to the entrance. Christian opened the front door with his key, and then the apartment. Everybody stay where you are, nobody move. Swan shouted, and with a deft move he knocked the con artist to the ground. All right, don't touch the cup or the vial with your hands. We're going to get some experts down here to look into this. The investigator handcuffed Carl and reported the incident by phone to the department. Mom, did you drink tea from this cup? Christian asked worriedly. No, of course not. I knew right away that the bastard wanted to take advantage of my absence. So it was a setup, whispered the man lying on the floor. It's all right, you can't prove anything. Of course we won't. Christian took the phone out of the set and stopped the recording. Yes, we can. Comrade investigator, please include the recording from this phone in the case file. Swan took the phone. 10 minutes later, a task force was already on the scene. The swindlers were taken to the department. The expert put the cup and the vial back in his briefcase. The officers briefly interviewed all the witnesses of the incident. They acted quickly. Apparently, there were a lot of calls today. After the team left, Investigator Swan decided to stay in the apartment and interview everyone in detail himself. Annie and Ellen sat in the chairs. Christian had brought chairs from the kitchen for himself and the investigator, but Swan wouldn't sit down. First, he watched the camera footage in snippets. Then he went to the window, thought, and turned to those seated. What is it, citizens, detectives? Let me ask you a few questions. The investigator looked each one over carefully and stopped on Christian. Was your idea with the telephone? Yes, Christian answered and lowered his eyes. He probably thought that the investigator would start lecturing him about the illegality of secret surveillance. Original. Swan complimented Christian. For the first time in my career, I'm proud of the bar. They can't get away with that kind of evidence. Next, he turned his gaze to Annie. You? How did you even decide to do this? Is it boring to sit idle, comrade captain? Annie answered calmly. And the fact that they used some substances, I realized from the very beginning. You're a very brave woman, Swan said in a steady voice. After a moment's silence, he continued with a puzzled expression. I just cannot understand how, if they use such crude methods, they could not catch them neither in our department nor in other cities. After all, dealing with apartments is one thing. Poisoning the elderly with some unknown crap is another. I think I know what it is, Ellen said timidly. They haven't used such crude methods before. I don't understand why they suddenly decided to use poison in their last two scams, Swan asked. The thing is, first of all, it's not poison, but some kind of sedative that impairs attention and memory. And secondly, I think they had this vial with them on every deal, just in case, like a plan B. It's just that before that they came across quiet, Naive old ladies who were really lonely and unhappy, and were happy for any opportunity to provide themselves a decent old age and help their distant relatives. It was enough to talk to them, to convince them to give the apartment. Therefore, the swindlers did not need to put anything in the tea. Everything happened by itself, but here, they ran into an elderly woman first. She must have started questioning and sarcastic behavior from the doorstep. I don't know how she let them in the first place. I think the con artist used a psychological trick, interrupted the girl investigator. It is unlikely that they began to bully her from the doorstep. Did they say anything about the apartment? About charity, aid, social, state program? But that is, they began to ride on the ears, and when they were already in the apartment, they got down to business. Well, maybe, agreed the girl. So they could not cope with the manifestations of the character of an elderly woman for a long time. First, they invented this unfortunate receipt. Apparently, it didn't help. Then the swindlers remembered about the presence of Plan B, and somewhere poured the contents of the vial to put this woman's guard down. The actress, with the help of her talent, was able to repeat this situation. First pressurized the man with questions, hurt him with barbs, and she managed to piss him off, because of which he took up the method already tested on that woman. Bravo. The investigator nodded his head approvingly. It all fits together now. I began to guess something. When you told me about the fact that before the receipt did not appear in these transactions, on the one hand, I realized that it was the result of the persistence of that woman. And on the other hand, I did not believe that it was possible to get rid of the pressure with one piece of paper. The girl hesitated. But wait, if everything was as I just told, then why today at the examination in the blood of that woman did not find anything? I think that question will be answered by the results of the analysis of the contents of the vial. But in my practice, I've seen such substances, which are eliminated from the body in a few hours. The con artist must have used something from this series. The investigator did not have time to finish his sentence. He was interrupted by a phone call. Oh yeah? How come? Who was the interrogator? I see. We'll think about it. Swan's face darkened, and he sat back in his chair. The con man doesn't want to help our investigation, the investigator said. He's talking and acting on his own. He's never heard of any cooperation. How could he not? Annie exclaimed. Why would he say that? He's looking at a much longer sentence. They said he'd get a lighter sentence for cooperating. Yes, I suppose they did, said Swan. He was questioned by a young investigator. His superiors told him to split the cases evenly, so they did. I think these officers had a third contingency plan to act weird. Either they were promised a lot of money, or they were threatened. I don't see any other reason why a small-time con artist would want to incriminate himself. So what do we do now? Ellen asked anxiously. Can't we bring the whole office to justice? It will work. It will work, the investigator reassured her. As far as I understand from your testimony, one of the organizers is a woman named Isabel. If she, of course, gave her real name, she should be detained and arrange a confrontation with the swindler Carl. And on what grounds will you detain her? If this guy is silent? Annie asked, on the basis of your statement. You made an appointment with her first, didn't you? That's grounds. Of course, it's not enough for a trial, but I think she'll tell everything after the first confrontation. Then we'll find all the strings, and we'll be done. The investigator looked at Ellen. And you, I'll ask you to bring your mother-in-law to the station. In principle, it's better for everyone to be there. But it is Lexi who will have to participate in the climax of the confrontation. Isn't it right that the two con men came to her place together? Yes, she told about a young man and a woman. Ellen nodded. Good. So in an hour and a half I expect you at my office. But she doesn't remember much. What am I going to tell her? The main thing she remembers is that it was just the two of them. The details don't matter. Suddenly the investigator's phone rang again. He listened silently, said thank you, and hung up. Well, as I thought, the tea was laced with a sedative, which is quickly eliminated from the body. It's harmless in most cases, the investigator said. He remembered where the phone call had interrupted him. What should I tell my mother-in-law? But think of something. You have a good imagination. All right, time to go to work. We have to find this woman first. The investigator left. Ellen went to Lexi's mother-in-law's house. She had a rough idea of what she was going to say to the old woman. "Don't worry, I have some bad news for you," Ellen began. "The thing is that yesterday some con artists came to your apartment, but they were caught. So your apartment is not in any danger." "What are you talking about? How awful." "I let those people into my house." Lexi was upset. "There's no need to feel bad about it. You're the reason they were apprehended. Here are partially not lying. There's no telling how many more elderly, lonely people these crooks would have managed to scam if they hadn't run into you. So what do we do now?" "Nothing. Everything will stay the same. Except you're going to have to go to the police for a lineup." Lexi was worried at first, but then she calmed down a little. An hour later, Ellen was about to call a cab, but she got a call from Swan. "Ellen, the confrontation is canceled today. We haven't been able to find the organizers yet. The office is empty, cleaned out to the last piece of paper, so it's going to have to wait." Ellen warned Lexi not to go anywhere today. Ellen began to worry again. What if the crooks managed to get away? Would the court void the deal? The situation was escalating. First the employee refused to testify, now Isabel had run away. Ellen could only hope for the professionalism of law enforcement. The next day, Ellen woke up to a call from the investigator. "Everything's fine. She's in custody. She got a bolo on her way out of town. Good thing you got her license plate number. And that she's already been questioned? Yeah, she doesn't know or remember anything either. She refuses to testify. So take your mother-in-law and come down to the station right now." 20 minutes later, Ellen and Lexi were sitting outside the coroner's office. The confrontation had already begun, and they could hear snippets of it in the hallway. "So you're saying you don't know this man?" The investigator asked questions loudly. "And you say that you see this woman for the first time?" The con artist refused to answer. Swan tried for another 5 minutes to crack the suspects, but to no avail. Then he went out into the hallway and called Lexi into his office. "Citizen Kalin, please tell me, do you recognize these men?" asked the investigator. "Yes, of course," Lexi answered. "They came to see me 2 days ago, promising me a good old age." Carl and Isabel's faces changed immediately. It was obvious that they realized the failure of all their plans. "Thank you," Swan said. "Sign here, please." The investigator handed the paper and pen to the older woman. "Everyone, please wait," he asked. In the hallway, a pale Lexi. Once again they sat down in the chairs outside Swan's office. For the first time in the last couple days, Ellen could breathe a sigh of relief. It was finally over. A few minutes later, 2 police officers entered the office and led the criminals out. "Ellen, come in." Swan's voice was heard. Ellen entered the office. Lexi remained sitting in the hallway. "What's up?" Ellen asked anxiously. "Did we crack?" "Yes, great," replied the investigator cheerfully. "But I didn't understand why they went to Lexi's place together." "They always went everywhere together," Swan explained. "The young man did all the dirty work. The woman was just scamming old people for money. They were about to call it quits, probably to another town. But your Annie got in hand and Isabel quickly sent Carl to register her, while she covered her tracks. They caught the con man. Isabel thought she was lucky it wasn't the 2 of them. But it wasn't to be. What scoundrels they were. Ellen was outraged. "Yeah, but thanks to you and Lexi we were able to catch them," Swan summarized. "With this evidence they'll be gone for at least 10 years. "Well, thank you notes for you, your mother-in-law, and your fellow lawyers," Swan said. "I'll do the paperwork. What about Annie?" "I think we should do something separate for Annie," Ellen replied. "I'll write a report to my superiors about giving her an award and a bonus. After all, she was risking her health. Who knew what was in that vial? So we'll give her the highest honor." Ellen said goodbye to the investigator and walked out into the hallway with Lexi. They went home. The worst was over. As it turned out, all these adventures had a positive effect on Ellen's future relationship with her mother-in-law. Lexi practically stopped pressuring her daughter-in-law and began to communicate with her simply as a good friend. A husband threw his wife and child out on the street and went to his mistress. If only he knew what awaited him. Thursday evening in the apartment, located in one of the hundreds of ordinary residential high-rise buildings, again heated argument broke out. Elsa did not want to put up with the indifference of her husband and arranged an interrogation. "Yes, everything is fine with us," as he could, he fought back. "I'm just tired at work." Elsa was not satisfied with this answer. "Your job hasn't changed for 2 years, and you weren't tired before, and now all of a sudden you are. Yeah, well, it's winter, it's cold. Vitamin D deficiency, you should take your family to the sea, and you'd have more energy." Instead of an answer, Elsa got only a familiar sour look on her face. "I have to repair the car, not to the sea. All I need now is to eat in peace." It's always like this. He has everything nice and calm. He went to work, came home and dinner was ready. The child is dressed and washed. Sit quietly, eat, and do not even try to solve family problems. Elsa took her daughter in her arms and went to the bedroom, not forgetting to slam the door loudly. "Honey, go play. Mommy needs to talk to Aunt Vivian." Elsa let her daughter go to the floor and pointed at the toys. "Look who it is. It's your favorite horse." Her daughter happily ran after the horse, and Elsa grabbed her phone from the dresser and dialed a message to her friend. "We had another fight. He won't even hear me. He says, 'Let me eat in peace, asshole.'" The reply came back a few minutes later. "Are you fighting again? Elsa, he doesn't appreciate you anymore. Have you thought about doing something about it? What can you do about it?" Elsa wrote, "Well, I'd go away for a couple days. Let him miss me first." That's a good idea, Elsa thought. But there's one problem, Maggie, the daughter, has no one to leave her with. And of course she can't be left at home with a busy husband. "Why, Vivian, can't you take her with you?" "That's a problem," replied her friend. Really, why should a daughter be an obstacle to taking a break from her husband? And maybe even show him that she would not be tied to the house and sit to suffer. And then Elsa began to have a plan. "Eugene, Vivian and I are going away for 2 days. I want a vacation with a friend. We'll stay in Miami," she said. Eugene got off the phone. "Don't you have anything else to do?" "What, Miami in winter? The weather forecast is bad." "They say it's 25 degrees and I need warmth and fresh air," Elsa insisted. Eugene nodded and went back to his smartphone, muttering something like, "Well, go if you have to. How are you going to make a meal alone?" Elsa was worried. "I'll buy food. I won't starve, don't worry." "Which friend are you going with?" "Maggie. You don't know her very well. She's a former coworker of mine." Eugene nodded briefly and didn't say another word. Elsa couldn't calm down, thinking the same thing. Why did he react so weakly? What's the matter? Elsa remembered how she and her husband had met. It had been 10 years ago. Eugene is the brother of her former best friend, Emily. The first time she saw her future husband, Elsa knew for sure that he was the man she wanted to be her life partner. He was a very tall, handsome, and tastefully dressed young man. The relationship developed quickly and beautifully. Eugene gave the most desirable gifts, called for dates to the best places in the city, and once they even flew to Paris. That evening in a hotel near the Louvre, Elsa remembered for the rest of her life. It was the first day in the city. They walked along the central streets, saw the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and had breakfast in a bakery on the summer veranda. Then they checked into a hotel. They had only been dating for 6 months, so Elsa thought that this trip was just a pleasant weekend. But it turned out to be much more serious. "Will you marry me?" Eugene asked, and took out a black velvet box with a ring from his pocket. From surprise and joy, Elsa squealed, probably for the whole hotel. Yes, of course, yes. From that moment their family history began. And now, years later, the birth of their daughter Vivian, and many wonderful evenings together. He's changed. The constant delays at work, the aloofness and coldness, it all brought sad thoughts. "I don't think it's that bad," Elsa reasoned. He's probably just tired. Yes, she was starting to look worse than before. I need to take care of myself. Go to a beautician, Elsa shared with her friends. She read a lot of informative women's magazines and articles, and every second said about the need to be a good wife, to take care of themselves, cook a delicious dinner, and most importantly, do not interfere with her husband in the evenings. Elsa honestly tried to do all this, but the relationship was getting colder every day. On the eve of a trip to Miami, Eugene suddenly hugged Elsa as she was arranging dinner on plates. You know, I've been thinking things haven't been going very smoothly for us lately. I was wrong. I'm sorry, are you getting tired with your daughter? Maybe since you're already going to Miami. You could stay a little longer. We've been working so hard for so long. For what? To be able to rest. Get yourself a nice room for a week. Elsa looked at her husband with surprise. But shouldn't we vacation together? We still will. But it's a lot of work right now. A total jam, you know. Gotta make money for us, for our daughter. Eugene pulled Elsa to him and kissed her. And stay in touch so I don't worry. Words couldn't convey the relief Elsa felt that evening. It was as if the lump in her chest had stopped pressing, constantly reminding her of herself. She grabbed her phone and texted Maggie, you know, maybe I'm overreacting and we're fine. It's just that he's tired and so am I. That's what happens when a couple is together for so long. All evening Elsa flew around the apartment in high spirits, packing for herself and her daughter. Vivian played quietly with her toys and hummed something in her baby language. Elsa set a large suitcase by the door and put in it all the summer clothes she could find, a couple of bottles of cream and a swimsuit. Why do you need such a big suitcase? Eugene asked, coming into the room. How was your week of vacation? I want to have dresses to wear, pretty blouses. And here Elsa pointed to the second part of the suitcase. Here's just Vivian's stuff. Can you carry all this to the terminal from the airport to the hotel by yourself? I thought you were walking us to the airport, Elsa said reproachfully to her husband. Eugene scratched his head. I'll call you a cab. Why should I go to see you off if you're going to check in 5 minutes anyway? But I'd love it if you could see me and my daughter off. I need help with the suitcase and the stroller. It's going to be hard to carry all that stuff right away. Well, I'll see if I can get a day off in the morning. You're the head of the department. Can't you spare an hour to do it yourself? No, Eugene shouted. I'm actually working. If I'm going to go off for every little thing, no one's going to keep me there. Elsa threw her things into her suitcase. Nonsense. A wife and daughter is nonsense. All right, I'll take my own leave. I'll do it myself. Unable to restrain herself any longer, she threw things, pencil cases, pushed the suitcase with her feet, and constantly muttered. Asshole. Who am I living with? Eugene decided that he had had enough of this performance and went to the kitchen, saying something like, but that's what I thought. She's completely out of her mind. In the morning, Elsa got up earlier than usual, forgetting all the arguments and misunderstandings. Eugene wasn't there in bed, but she decided he was in the kitchen and went over to her daughter's crib. Vivian was sleeping sweetly and apparently wasn't going to wake up for another couple hours. Elsa threw on a robe and went into the kitchen. Eugene was not there, not in the bathroom, not in the toilet. Elsa picked up her cell phone and called. Hello, where are you? She asked in a broken voice. What do you mean? I don't understand, Eugene. I'm on my way to work. What's your problem? I thought you were going to see us off, Elsa shouted. Are you out of your mind? It's only 7 at some job, and you don't get off until 8. I told you yesterday that I'm not going to see you off. We've got all these projects burning up, we're running out of time. Oh yeah? Well, what then? Elsa canceled the call and called her husband the last words, cursing to herself. He has to work at 7? Vivian, as if sensing her mother's irritation, decided to wake up and cried loudly throughout the house. What's the matter? Elsa mumbled and went to her daughter. The day was hopelessly ruined from the very morning. Of course, Elsa didn't expect her husband to suddenly burst into flaming love, which he hadn't shown for a couple of years. But what she hadn't counted on was that he would not only stop caring about the family, but that he would do it so obviously. The next hour flew by like a blur. With one hand, Elsa dressed her daughter, and with the other she hailed a cab to the airport. Rolling down with her suitcases, she finalized the last of her travel arrangements. Airport. The driver asked as Elsa got into the car. Yes, and if you could hurry up, please. You see, it wasn't easy packing with my daughter. Sure, but I won't break the rules, the driver specified. Thank you, Elsa exhaled with relief. I'm not asking you to break the rules. No, it's my daughter. The driver looked at Elsa through the mirror. And what, your husband does not help you? And ran away early in the morning to work. He didn't even offer to help. Bad husband. I do not always help in everything, and groceries from the store to bring, and things to take to the airport. Well, I guess you just love your wife. And your husband doesn't love you anymore. Was surprised by the cab driver. I don't think so, Elsa answered after a short thought. It's just that we've been together too long. Is it a difficult period for him or for you? Elsa thought about it, and really, if you think about it that way, Eugene is doing fine. She was the only one who was worried all the time. The vacation season was just beginning, but the airport was already packed to capacity. The driver helped unload his things and wished Elsa good luck with her family problems. Then he drove away quickly, so as not to block the driveway. Elsa sat her daughter down and rolled her suitcases to the check-in area, typing a message for her friend Maggie. I'm here. Have you arrived yet? Elsa made her way through the crowd to the check-in window at number 12. On the scoreboard, the word Miami burned brightly. A large line had already gathered here. Elsa stood at the very end of the tail. Arrived. At the front desk, come on up, came the reply from Maggie. Maggie quickly found the right line and waved happily to her friend. She was only carrying a small backpack. Where's all the stuff? Elsa wondered. So they are here, what there in Miami need? A swimsuit, shorts, and a couple of t-shirts. And you took a whole suitcase. Maggie nodded at Vivian, who was sitting next to her. How are you guys doing? The old ones. Better, Elsa admitted. I've been carrying like a horse all morning. Vivian cries all the time, and Eugene refused to help with packing and didn't even see us off. His work is urgent, can you imagine? Do you want me to tell you the truth? Maggie asked. I don't like this whole thing. It's too weird, because a year ago he was practically carrying you around in his arms. Did he happen to have another woman? Oh, really? What girl? Elsa shook her head. He can't cope with his family. Maybe that's why he can't cope, Maggie persisted. I don't want to spoil your mood. It's just so weird. Doesn't he pay enough attention to his daughter? But he's just tired. You know, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think he's seeing anyone. He's at work all the time. And he says there's a lot of pending projects, and everything needs to be finished as soon as possible. Yeah, Elsa grinned. Men like to talk, tell a lot of things. It's very beautiful. I don't want to think about it now. Come on, it's our turn. Elsa went to the check-in desk and held out her passport. Your luggage? The receptionist asked. Yes, it's right here. Elsa glowered. But Maggie waved her hand and put the suitcase on the belt herself. Let me help you a little. Don't go crazy. We're on vacation, after all. Elsa smiled. The receptionist printed out boarding passes and held them out. Maggie checked in quickly too, and they headed to the lounge. We have an hour and a half. I suggest we sit in a coffee shop somewhere, Maggie suggested. I'd love to. Elsa almost jumped with joy. I'm so hungry for coffee and some dessert. They found a coffee shop that wasn't the most crowded. Elsa immediately landed in a chair, and then smiled happily at her daughter and half-jokingly, half-seriously remarked, "And you, Olenka, madam. And well, you will be strong, sit next to me." Elsa sat her daughter next to her and took the menu. So, sweet dessert. Pavlova. That's it. Excellent choice. Maggie smiled. I'll have tea and Napoleon. Maggie looked at her friend while they were taking her order. Well, tell me in detail what's going on with you and Eugene. Elsa shook her head sadly. I don't understand anything myself, to be honest. A couple years ago, even a year ago, things were completely different. He was so kind, so understanding, he gave gifts. We traveled a lot, bought an apartment and a car together. And now he's not the same at all. We've stopped talking. He doesn't pay much attention to Vivian either. When I told him about the trip, he barely reacted and didn't even go to see us off. That's what made me the most suspicious. Tired is one thing, but not wanting to spend time with his family is weird. You sure it didn't seem to you like he was glad you were gone? Maggie asked. No, I don't think so, Elsa said. He might be glad he doesn't have to talk to me for a week, though. I just hope he misses me and we can fix things. The waiter brought drinks and desserts to the table. Anything else? He asked. No, thank you, Maggie replied. Let's hurry up and eat this and go find our flight or we'll miss our landing. Elsa nodded and sent the first spoonful of pavlova into her mouth. It was very tasty. Maggie quickly ate her Napoleon and cheered up. Did you know we have a whole week of vacation ahead of us? So forget about your Eugene and just enjoy life. Miami Sea, heat, paradise. I guess you're right. I've had enough. Elsa kissed her daughter on the nose, and she giggled happily. The flight went smoothly. Vivian slept, and Elsa looked out the window and listened to music, trying not to think about anything. Miami met the travelers with excellent weather. The thermometer showed plus 28 degrees. Wow. Maggie admired, taking off her sweater. Yes, it's summer here. Let's take a cab and go to the hotel. We need to get rid of all this stuff. Elsa admired the view, palm trees, the sun, the sea. One look was enough to feel the endorphins filling her body. I don't even feel sad, she said. This place is amazing. What did I tell you? Maggie laughed. The hotel where they'd booked their rooms was just like the picture, stylish, modern, with a luxurious lobby. The nice girl at the front desk quickly issued guest cards and showed them how to get to the elevator. Near the elevator was a huge mirror, and Elsa stared at her reflection in full height. Wow, I'm really messing myself up, she thought. My jeans are too tight on my legs and my hair. I should go to the hairdresser. It can't be the way it used to be. She'd always taken care of herself. I'd better get cleaned up. Masha, she turned to her friend, will find a spa in Miami. Smiled her friend. And what would you like? First to the hairdresser. I need a touch-up and maybe a trim. That's a good idea. Let's go today. I'll play with Vivian while you take care of yourself, okay? The room was once again more boring than imagined. 2 rooms, one for Elsa and one for Maggie. In the center of the room was a large table and beautiful chairs with green velvet upholstery. But the most important thing was not that, but a huge window that overlooked the sea. Elsa shrieked with delight and ran to open the windows to let the sea air into the room. Now I'm just happy, she exclaimed. Me too. Maggie whirled around the room, putting things in closets and dressers. Can you believe it? And we have a whole week. Okay, now give me Vivian and go change. Let's go for a walk right now. As if in response to this suggestion, Vivian laughed and clapped her hands. The first day of vacation stretched into 2 days. One began in the morning in her home apartment, and the second was like a part of another life that was just beginning. Maggie dragged Elsa around to every interesting place she saw. They started with a local store where they picked out a beautiful beige dress with a macrame-style cape. Put it on right now. Come on, it looks great on you, Maggie exclaimed. Great, Elsa said sarcastically and went to the fitting room. A couple minutes later, she came out in a new look. It's gorgeous. And now to the hairdresser. The way to the salon lay through the main streets and the pedestrian alley stretching along the sea. At every step, Elsa turned her head around so as not to miss anything interesting. The bathing season hadn't started yet, but the center was already filled with tourists. Elsa admired not only the sea and houses, but also looked at beautiful people, men and women. She loved beauty in all its manifestations and admired those who found time and opportunities to keep a stylish look. There's the barber shop. Come on, Maggie dragged her friend inside. Decided that you want a bob, Elsa answered briefly, but after thinking she added, and maybe some light chalking? Let's see what the hairdresser says. The salon smelled of flowers, mixed with hairspray and hair dyes. A short girl in a black apron came out. Good afternoon. Can I help you? I'd like to do something with my hair, a haircut, and maybe remove some of this yellowing, Elsa said. The master looked at Elsa carefully. We'll do everything. Have a seat in the chair, she said. And you? She turned to Maggie. I'll just sit here with the girl, Maggie replied, sitting down in the chair and taking Vivian in her arms. Then she looked at Elsa. Good luck. The hour in the chair went by quickly. Elsa looked at herself in the mirror. Now she looked like her old self again, a beautiful, well-groomed woman with bright hair and shining eyes. Elsa thanked the master and quickly took a selfie, then thought for a moment and sent it to her husband. I wonder what he'll say. She got excited and got up from her chair. Well, it's gorgeous. It suits you very well, Maggie exclaimed as Elsa came up to them. Now let's go, we need to show ourselves and see the world. The day was coming to an end. Dusk was slowly descending on the city. Elsa and Maggie walked along the promenade and turned to the sea station with a tall spire that could be seen from afar. Then they went to the hotel. Vivian was very tired today. It's been a long day, said Elsa. Let's sit in the room, order some food, suggested Maggie. Let's do it. I'm not Vivian, but I'm exhausted too. But tomorrow we'll have a full program. Have you already thought it all out? Elsa grinned. A new message sounded. She looked at the phone screen. What is it? Maggie craned her neck. Nothing, Eugene, Elsa replied. He just wrote beautiful. I sent him a picture from the hairdressers. That's it? Maggie wondered. He hadn't written anything else all day? Nothing. But that's not my problem now. We decided that I wouldn't think about him on vacation. That's the right thing to do. In fact, if I were you, I wouldn't write him at all tomorrow. Back at the hotel, Elsa put Vivian in her crib and quietly went into the other room. Wow, she passed out fast. I usually put it off for half an hour, she said. That's rough, Maggie said. How hard can it be to raise a child? You don't say. But it's also a joy, Elsa said. Okay, Maggie nodded. Elsa looked uncertainly at Maggie's friend. Let's think about what we'll order. Here's the menu. And you know, I'm thinking about champagne. I'm on vacation. But I'm not alone. I'm not supposed to get drunk, said Elsa. But feel free to have one if you want. Come on, just one glass. You can afford a case. I deserve it, Maggie said. No, I'm not in the mood. But I would love a nice cup of tea. I think I'll have a couple hot dogs and some tea. And I'll get a bottle of wine and some grapes. It's vacation time, laughed Maggie. 10 minutes later, a waiter in a black suit knocked on the door. Good evening, your order, he said, bringing in a cart. Maggie set the plates and cups on the table. Do you have everything you need? The waiter asked. Yes, Maggie smiled. Except good company. The guy was embarrassed, coughed, and wishing her a good evening, hurried away. Well, now we're definitely resting, Maggie said. Elsa watched with tension as her friend emptied one glass after another and became more and more cocky. Will that be enough? She asked when Maggie had finished the third glass. I'm not going clubbing with you, if anything. My daughter's asleep. Oh, that's a shame. I was just going out for a nightcap. After all, life in a city like Sochi is just beginning. Maggie was upset. Don't be. Stop being such a boring bore. Take Vivian and let's go. She taunted Ilona. Are you crazy? Vivian is asleep, and I'm not taking her anywhere. Elsa cut her off. "That's fine," Maggie waved her hand. She got up and went to change. Soon she came out in a black dress. "Don't wait at my place until morning. I'm going to party hard." "Good luck," Elsa wished her sarcastically, and closing the door behind her friend, lay down on the bed. She checked her phone. Not a single message, not a single call, not even a simple question about how she was doing. What was going on after all? Despite Maggie's assurances that she would be out all night when she wasn't there at 3 or 4 in the morning, Elsa was worried. Need to call her, or who knows where this one might have gotten herself into. However, no call was answered. But 5 minutes later, Maggie sent a selfie picture with a handsome stranger. "Who the hell is that?" Elsa immediately asked, and, after thinking, added, "Don't you dare bring him to our room." "I won't." The answer came immediately. "Don't be so narrow-minded. Max is a great guy. They won't let him in the hotel without you. Don't worry." "What if Vivian cries?" Elsa worried. Vivian whimpered in the crib. Elsa left the phone on the bed and rushed to her daughter. "What's wrong, sweetie? Are you hungry?" Elsa took her daughter in her arms, gave her water, and rocked her. Thankfully, it worked. Vivian closed her eyes again. Elsa realized she couldn't wait for her friend either, so she lay down next to her, and when she opened her eyes, the bright sun was already beating through the windows. A new day had begun. Elsa got up and immediately checked on her daughter. She was still asleep, twitching her arms funny. She must have seen something interesting in her dream and wanted to grab it. Elsa smiled and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "Open up, it's me." Maggie's voice rang out. Well, she's finally back, Elsa thought, and opened the door. On the threshold stood her friend, tired but quite happy. She had taken off her high-heeled shoes and was holding them in her hands. "Hi. Did you sleep well?" "Not very much," Elsa answered. "I was worried about you." "You shouldn't have been." "I'm fine," Maggie replied. She stopped and inhaled the aroma with pleasure. "Oh, this coffee smells great. I'll get a mug." "Go ahead. I made enough for 2. Maggie nodded happily and, swaying slightly with fatigue, walked to the bar and climbed onto a high stool. Taking a sip of the invigorating drink, she exclaimed, "You have no idea who I met. I'll tell you all about it." "Don't shout like that, please," Elsa begged. "Vivian is still asleep." "Oh yes, sorry. Anyway, listen. I went to one of the most popular local bars. I just wanted to sit, relax, look at people. And this man came up to me. Very handsome. You have no idea. We got to talking. He said he doesn't usually do this, but he wanted to meet me for some reason. Anyway, he's really cool, and he works as a director somewhere. I didn't ask for details. But if he's a good guy, I'm happy for you," smiled Elsa. "However, I would not be in a hurry to make any conclusions about him on the first day of acquaintance." "I'm not in a hurry. You should see how attentive and caring he is. So sweet, just like my Eugene a few years ago," said Maggie. "Yes," said Elsa. "Well, yes," said Maggie, embarrassed. "But that doesn't mean he's going to be like that. And by the way, I left out the most important thing. He has a friend, and he's not married. I suggested that Max take him with him tonight. And you can come with me too. We'll have dinner at a great place." "No way. Where are we going to take Vivian?" Elsa was surprised. "I told them you have a daughter and they don't mind. So we'll take her with us." "Have you ever thought about the fact that I'm actually married and I'm not going to meet anyone?" Elsa got angry. "Here, don't make it up," Maggie said. "First of all, I'm not telling you to go out with him, just to get acquainted. And second of all, maybe you should think about the future. Because if you want the truth, Eugene is your fool, and there's something wrong with him. Have you checked his cell phone? Especially when he's late for work?" "I haven't," Elsa blurted out. "What are you implying? You think he's cheating on me?" "What do you think? He didn't go to see you off. He's not interested in you or Vivian. How many times did he call you yesterday? How many? None, agreed Elsa. And yet it still doesn't mean anything. I didn't notice anything suspicious, no traces of lipstick, no scent of perfume, no calls in the night, nothing like that. Well, then he's hiding well, or he's just tired. Maybe the spark between us is gone. We have to rekindle it somehow, Elsa said thoughtfully. But Maggie almost giggled, but held back. Then she said seriously, Elsa, you are such a beautiful, intelligent woman, and your husband does not appreciate you at all. Let's go to dinner. You don't have to go out with anyone tonight. You don't even have to book a room. We'll just expand our social circle. You know, a network of acquaintances is a very useful thing. Okay, Elsa agreed. I just won't wear the same net dress we bought yesterday. It's nice, but it's for a walk on the beach, not a restaurant. I don't care if you wear a sweater and tights, but I can get you a dress. I have one that would be perfect for you. Blue, evening. Elsa tried on the dress. It fit her perfectly, as if it had been made for her. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled, a slight blush immediately appearing on her face. Yes, definitely a vacation. A trip to the hairdresser and shopping could do wonders. Elsa took out her makeup bag and lightly tinted her eyelashes. Suddenly there was a message on her phone. Hi, how are you? Have you finally decided to inquire? Elsa said and quickly dialed. Everything's great. We're going for a walk. You'll be in Miami until Sunday, right? Yeah, I'll fly in Sunday at 4 p.m. Why? Nothing. I'll see what I'm busy with. Maybe I'll see you. How's that? Maggie walked into the room, and when she saw her friend, she gasped, wow. You look great. Maybe a little more lipstick? No, just the dress and mascara, and that's it. What do you say? Well, there's plenty of time before tonight. Why don't we go to the beach? Elsa nodded and went to gather Vivian, who was just waking up. The day passed cheerfully and quietly. Elsa and Vivian swam in the sea and warmed themselves on the beach under a large umbrella. Eugene was no longer showing signs of life, and Elsa wondered if she was doing the right thing by going to this dinner. What are you so excited about? Maggie asked. It's just dinner and small talk in a restaurant full of people. Do you think your husband has never been to one? You're probably right, Elsa agreed. Just promise that we won't go anywhere afterward. Not to any hotel beaches or even worse, to someone's house. No, of course not. Maggie was indignant. I wouldn't dream of suggesting that to you. All right? Well, let's try it. It'll probably be interesting. You won't regret it. As the sun set over the horizon, Elsa, Vivian, and Maggie went back to the hotel to change. The packing went without adventure. Elsa wore the same blue dress and picked up a beautiful beige jumpsuit for her daughter. Maggie, however, outdid herself and chose a bright red dress. Wow, too beautiful and daring, Elsa admired. Thank you for the compliment. Maggie jumped up and down. That's exactly the effect I wanted. Well, the cab is waiting for us. Let's go. The restaurant was right on the ocean, in the most beautiful spot overlooking the mountains. The lights were on everywhere, and it was so bright, it was as if night had not yet fallen. Maggie took Elsa's hand and pulled her inside, looking around the tables for her new acquaintance. Finally, she saw him and waved. Seeing Maggie, Max immediately stood up and rushed over to meet her. Hi, glad you could make it. I picked a table by the window. Hi, Maggie smiled flirtatiously. Great place. By the way, this is Elsa and Vivian. Nice to meet you, Elsa. Vivian, hi. Max smiled and turned to the table. And this is Victor, my friend. Elsa smiled and waved awkwardly, then took her seat and sat Vivian down. Are you okay with me being on a first-name basis? Max asked. Nothing, Maggie replied. You didn't really want to go out yesterday, but today you agreed. How do you like Miami? Is it nice to warm up and relax? It's a great place, Victor, Max's friend agreed. I won't be here long myself, but it's a great place for a vacation. Where are you from? From Moscow, Maggie answered. And you must be from the same city, Vince said. Yes, we're from New York, said Elsa, staring at the menu. Let's order something. Vince suggested. I was here last week. The food is very good. The steak was especially good. It was well done. Elsa, do you want a steak? Maggie opened the menu and flipped through a few pages. You like meat, don't you? Yes, I guess so, Elsa smiled. And some tea. Tea, said Vince. Coffee for me. Is everyone so serious? Max laughed. I'd take a coffee too, though. I'm driving. I'll have rolls. Maggie looked at Max. California. Juicy. Delicious. When the food selection was done, a casual conversation ensued. Max told how he had moved to Miami 5 years ago because he was tired of the cold winters in New York. Elsa noticed how Maggie was looking at him with shining eyes and immediately understood. It looked like her friend was in love. Well, are you not planning to move? Maggie asked, turning to Vince. No. I've got a lot of things to do in New York, all tied up. I can't work remotely. What do you do, if it's no secret? I manage hotels. It's still in its infancy. It's a lot of work. And you, Elsa, what do you do in life? Now, on maternity leave, Elsa pointed at her daughter, who was happily crawling on a high chair with a toy kindly brought by the waiters. And actually, I'm a florist. Wow, that's awesome. Do you want to go back to work? I would, of course. As soon as Vivian's 2, we can think about daycare. But in the meantime, I'm doing the best I can. The evening turned out to be interesting. Elsa relaxed and enjoyed every time Max put his arm around Maggie's shoulders or just looked at her. Her friend deserved her happiness. For too long, things hadn't worked out for her. And he, Max, seemed like a good man. A couple hours later, dinner was over, and Vince hailed a cab to the hotel so that Elsa and Maggie would have an uneventful ride. Will I see you tomorrow? Max asked quietly, taking Maggie aside. She glowed and nodded. Of course I'll see you. Elsa wanted to get into the car, but suddenly Vince took her hand gently. It was nice to meet you, and your daughter is very sweet. Thank you, Elsa smiled. It's nice to meet you too. Without waiting for him to ask anything else, Elsa released his hand and put her daughter in the car. Then she got in herself. Maggie walked around the car and sat in the front seat. Shall we go? Yes, Vince turned on the ignition. Let's go. As soon as they arrived at the hotel and went up to the room, Maggie pestered Elsa with questions. What did you think of them? How are Max and Vince? I think they're great. You and Max look good together. But how do you want to go out with him if we're leaving soon? Maggie sighed. I haven't told you that yet, and I don't know yet, but I'm thinking about it. In general, I want to stay in Miami for at least a month. There will be seen. Elsa stared at her friend in surprise. Wow. And you did not rush to tell me this. And where will you live? First, I'll rent an apartment, and then maybe Max will offer to move in with him. And if he doesn't? Why are you talking about the bad stuff? What do you think of Vince? I told you he's a nice guy, but I'm not interested in him. I'm married, Maggie. And yet I wouldn't get in touch with him if he tried to write. It's Eugene here. He's bound to say something. Like what? Forget it, I'm just saying. But Vince really likes you. I don't care. Again, Maggie, you don't have to set me up with anyone. If I wanted a lover, I'd tell you about it. I hope the vacation does its job and Eugene and I can have a normal conversation. After all, we have a daughter in common. We'll have to live together somehow. Suit yourself, Maggie said as she went to her room. But I gave your number to Vince, Maggie said. What Elsa shouted at her friend so loudly that Vivian flinched in surprise and dropped the toy she was holding. I'm sorry, daughter. Now, Maggie, why did you do that? Oh, stop it. Okay, I'm really tired. I'm going to bed. He's not going to write you. You didn't even say goodbye to him. Is that okay? Forget it, Maggie closed the door behind her. Elsa was seething with indignation. She took her daughter in her arms. "It's time for you to go to bed too, sweetie. Aren't you hungry?" Vivian shook her head. Her daughter looked tired. Elsa laid her down on her large bed and lay down next to her. What does she even allow herself? This Maggie, Elsa continued angrily. "And I'm good too. Why did I even go there and let myself be talked into it? What will happen if Eugene finds out I'm here on vacation, going to all sorts of cafes with men? He's working there, making us money. What about me?" Making a firm promise to herself not to do anything like that again, Elsa closed her eyes and let fatigue take over. Sleep came over her almost instantly, but a few hours later Elsa jumped up at her daughter's cries and turned on the light. Vivian was all red. "Oh my God, what is this?" Elsa panicked and ran to the suitcase that held the first aid kit. Finding a thermometer, she put it to her daughter and stroked her hair, waiting for the measurements to finish. Finally, the alarm sounded 37.3, a fever, but not a high one. Elsa scrutinized the spots and clenched her teeth. The allergies were back, probably due to the local flora and fauna. But there was one problem: the medicine that always helped was left at home. Elsa grabbed Vivian and ran to the front desk. "Good morning. My daughter has allergies. Can you tell me where the nearest pharmacy is around here?" Hi. Yes, it's a block away. Can we help you? What's wrong? Should I call an ambulance?" "No, I just need to go to the pharmacy. She's allergic. It's happened before. I just need to give her some pills. If you don't need an ambulance, just give me a minute." "A member of our staff will take you to the pharmacy," the front desk said. Elsa nodded and hugged Vivian, cursing herself for all she was worth. Stupid. Who goes on vacation to Miami without taking allergy pills? I did, but I didn't take allergy pills. But I remembered to go against my better judgment. What a great mom I am. A tall guy in a suit came out into the hall. "I'll show you out." "Let's go. It's just around the corner." 5 minutes later, however, all was not so great. The pharmacy didn't have the medicine they needed, and neither did the second one, or the one 3 blocks away. The attendant threw up his hands. "Shouldn't we call a doctor after all? Even if it's not very dangerous for her. Let the doctors give the right medicine." Elsa nodded, and they hurried back to the hotel. The ambulance came very quickly. "We have given what is needed," said the doctor. "But my recommendation is to return home as soon as possible and give her a course of treatment away from all the blooming things. The girl will be better off in a familiar home environment." "Okay. I'll get the tickets right away today." Vivian looked much better. But Elsa wasn't going to put it off. She returned to the room and ran into a perplexed Maggie. After quickly describing the situation, Elsa said, "I'll get your things together." Panicked, Maggie said, "And you take the tickets. Now go to the airport, and in 3 hours you will be home." The flight was uneventful. Vivian slept in the seat, and Elsa, finally calmed down, flipped through a magazine, not forgetting to glance at her daughter every now and then. When the plane landed, Elsa called a cab and hurried home. In this turmoil and worry for her daughter, she did not even think to warn her husband about her return. It was only outside the house that she remembered that she hadn't told him anything. "It's only 4 o'clock. He's at work. I'll pull everything up, write a message, have him call the clinic, and get Vivian in to see the doctor." Elsa stepped into the elevator and pressed the button with the desired floor. And when she got to the door of the apartment, she was surprised something was wrong. From the apartment came the aroma of fresh baked goods. Perplexed, Elsa left her keys, opened the door, and, without thinking, walked toward the living room. Eugene was home, and not alone. What the hell is this? Elsa thought, tripping over a woman's sneakers. She didn't realize it right away, but only when Eugene, lightly dressed, jumped out to meet her, followed by a young girl in a silk blue robe. "Oh," said the girl, seeing who was standing near the entrance to the living room. Eugene was silent. There was a mixture of surprise and anger on his face. "Why did you come here today?" He squeezed out and turned to his companion. "Lindsay, please go to the room. I'll take care of it." Elsa pushed her husband into the room and followed to put Vivian in the chair. Then she turned around and blurted out, "What the hell is going on here? Are you out of your mind? Bringing this one into our house, into my house?" "What house?" Eugene asked in a surprised tone. "Is this your house? I thought it was mine, because I bought it with my own money." Elsa had forgotten all the shock she had experienced. She couldn't say a word. She sat down on the edge of the couch and stared into the void, hoping that everything was just a stupid dream. Maybe she hadn't left Miami yet and was just sleeping after hours of walking along the waterfront. Elsa rubbed her hands, pinched her palms with the tips of her fingernails, and realized no, it was all true. The awful truth. And Maggie had warned her that something was amiss. Why hadn't she believed her? Why did she think things could still work out between her and her husband? "All right," Elsa said with difficulty. "If that's the case, go away. I don't know what you were going to do with that. Go away." Eugene closed the door, came close enough to Elsa to speak softly but be heard. "But no, you're not kicking me out of my apartment. Understand? I've consulted the experts, and here's the thing. This apartment is 100% mine. So you're going to do the packing. And if you're going to come back early and mess it up, you pack it now." "Ruin what?" "Actually, Vivian got sick. Allergies flared up. So we got here early. And you know what? I'm glad I came. How long have you been?" Like this, lying to me, Eugene ignored the question. He was worried about something else. Take Vivian and leave. Later in court, you'll get custody, and we'll decide what days I can take her in. That's it. There's nothing more to discuss. What are you sitting around for? Get your ass in gear." "I'm not going anywhere. My daughter's sick. She needs to see a doctor. It's evening outside. Where are we going now?" "What is she sick with?" Eugene looked at his daughter. She's sitting there smiling, but look at her face and hands. "I'm not looking anywhere. Don't you dare manipulate that child. I won't let you. I told you, if you're still here in half an hour, I'll give you a hard time. Go." Elsa shouted angrily and went out into the corridor where the suitcase stood. Eugene's girlfriend also decided to have a say in the family squabble. "Actually, it's your own fault. You didn't pay attention to him at all. You forgot he was a man. Look at you. You hear me, you little brat? Get out of here and don't write." Elsa couldn't stand it. "How old are you anyway? You gonna tell me what to do? You think you're gonna live with Eugene?" "No, I don't think so. I'm not gonna give you a quiet life." Elsa took her daughter in her arms and rolled the suitcase up the stairs. She was followed by the unhappy cries of an aggrieved mistress. "If you interfere, I'll tear your hair off." "Or you," said Elsa and hurried away to the elevator. Eugene slammed the door loudly, and in the silence of the elevator, Elsa could clearly hear their conversation. Eugene was trying to calm his maiden, promising her that it would never happen again. And she, Elsa, was no longer an obstacle. Let that bastard never even dream of peace. I'll be a nuisance. And what a nuisance. She was angry. What to do now? Where do I go? Maggie's still in Miami. Another friend with a small child lives in a studio apartment. We can't go to their place. Her parents are in another city. Elsa went outside and sat down on a bench, then picked up her phone and dialed her friend. Maggie didn't answer right away, and it was hard to hear her. There was music blaring in the background. Get away to a quiet place. Elsa yelled. I'll be right there, Maggie replied. What's wrong? Is something wrong with Vivian? How was your flight? No, not with Vivian, with Eugene. Elsa told everything, and Maggie was shocked by what she heard. She was silent, unable to find any words, and then she blurted out, there he is. But where are you going? Why did you even go out? It's your house, too. I couldn't stay there with them. And Vivian was freaking out about the scandal. And Eugene said something to me that the apartment wasn't even mine, that he'd talked to some specialists. And then there's this, you have a minor child. So that's it? Go file a report, and I'll find a place for you to stay tonight. I'll call you back as soon as I find something. I'm not going anywhere. I'm tired. Vivian needs her pills, and I forgot to take them. I'm just going to sit here on the bench. You have a daughter in your arms. No bench. Maggie said, Wait, I'll book you a hotel room and a cab. You're at your house, not mine anymore. Wait, the car will be here in a minute. I'll call you back. Go on, hang up. Elsa didn't know how much time had passed before the call rang. Reluctantly, she picked up the phone and whispered, I'm listening. Toddy. Elsa, there's a cab coming. Get in. The driver will take you to the hotel. Do you have your passport with you? Yes. Good. So there won't be any problems at check-in. You'll have a room for a week so you can recover a little, and then you'll think about what to do next. You understand me? I'll come over tomorrow. Stay with you. You've got Max. He'll be fine without me for a couple days, and you need support. Oh, I got a text. The car's in the yard. A cab did indeed come by. Yeah, okay, I'm in. Thank you for your support, Maggie. I didn't expect it. Oh, come on. It's going to be okay. You'll see. No, it's not going to be okay. It's going to get better. That Eugene will regret everything, but it'll be too late. All right, go, we'll talk again. It wasn't until the hotel that Elsa realized what had happened. Now she was overcome by a wave of anger. She rushed around the room like an angry cat and scolded her husband with the last words. That's it. How long has he been with that young fool? So he doesn't need his daughter, he doesn't need his wife either. He's decided to take the apartment for himself. It's not going to work. We should go to a lawyer. His daughter won't be left on the street, despite the nightmare. Vivian was feeling better. Elsa managed to go to the pharmacy and find the right medication to replace the ones left at home. And in half an hour, the redness of her skin had gone away. Vivian played enthusiastically with the cubes, only occasionally giving voice. Suddenly, the phone rang. A message from her husband tomorrow. Come to the address I've left below. It's my lawyer. We need to solve all the issues with finances and the apartment, not counting on being able to use the child and take everything away from me. I'm not some fool. You can't do that. V10. 00. I'll be waiting in the lawyer's office. You won't make it, Elsa said aloud and forwarded the message to Maggie. Her friend answered very quickly. I'm already at the airport. I'm on the bus to board. I'll be there soon. You're not going to see any lawyer alone. Don't even think about it. That's what he came up with, genius. He doesn't even think about his daughter. But we'll show him. And a few minutes later, I'm flying out. Don't worry. Although I understand how shocked you are now, but everything will work out. I'll be at your hotel soon and wait for you. Kisses, hugs. Hang in there, Maggie said. A few hours later, she was sitting at a table in the hotel room across from a crying Elsa, comforting her as best she could. It was obvious. Elsa lamented. He stayed late at work, sometimes even on weekends, saying that there was an urgent project. And the way he talked to me. Why didn't I notice everything? No one wants to believe bad things, Maggie said. Do you think I've never been wrong? Look at Nigel. I had an even worse boyfriend. The only bad thing is that you have to live somewhere, and please don't be a fool not to give in to him. You should get everything for you and your daughter. You still need a place to live? Yeah, but he said, I don't even have to count on it. Did you sign any papers? Maybe he made some kind of a mess of things. What's the deal with the apartment? Who owns it? He is. It's complicated. His mom bought it and gave it to him. What do you mean, Mom? I don't understand, Maggie said. You bought it before Vivian was born, didn't you? Yes, but he took it over. I was stupid and naive. I didn't even think about arguing with Emily. Maggie jumped up from the table and waved her arms furiously. What are you saying? That he's going to take everything for himself? Like hell he will. You're registered there, aren't you? No. Like Vivian at my parents'. He kept promising that he was about to sign her in, but he never did. We had a fight or something. So here's the result. Girlfriend, are you out of your mind? Maggie couldn't calm down. She'd sit down in her chair and then jump up again. He looks like a cranberry in the snow. This is crazy. I'm going to text Max right now. I think he's got a friend who's a lawyer. Not Vince, another friend. Maybe he can give you some advice. No, don't, Elsa objected. Do you want to defend this scoundrel? Maggie was indignant. Not at all. You must take everything you can from him. However, it was easier said than done. The next day, Elsa put on her black suit, which she had taken on vacation for some reason, and so it was kept in her suitcase. She gathered her hair into a high ponytail and dressed her daughter. I'm ready, I guess she said. Maggie met her at the exit of the hotel. Her friend was dressed businesslike, too. A strange man was standing next to her. Hi, this is George. Maggie introduced him. He's a lawyer. Well, now let's go. Eugene was already waiting for Elsa in the office and was surprised when the whole crowd entered the office with her, the lawyer, Maggie with Vivian in her arms. He got up from his chair and stared at his wife with a displeased look. Who the hell is that? He asked. It's a lawyer, Elsa said arrogantly. Why? Why did you bring your daughter here? Do you think you'll get something through her? I don't think anything. I had no one to leave her with. But here we go. What did you want to tell me? The lawyer on Eugene's side, a tall blonde in a tight skirt, smiled wryly before proceeding to read out the documents. So let's start on Eugene's side. You, Elsa, have the following offer. He will give you $10,000 to start and pay you alimony monthly to support your daughter, $10,000. Elsa jumped up from her chair. Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind, Eugene? I know for a fact that we had at least $600,000 in our accounts. And by the way, some of it was mine. What's yours? What's $600,000? Are you out of your mind? It's not yours. You spent it all while you were at home, and a vacation to Miami. What do you think you went on that vacation with? Why don't you sit down and think about it? No way. I'll file a report on you, Elsa threatened. Wait, Elsa. The lawyer reached out to Eugene and pointed to a folder with documents. I have requested from you the certificate of ownership of the apartment and all other documents related to the property. And I'll be preparing a lawsuit to the court to divide the property and determine joint custody, Elsa's lawyer warned. And for alimony, of course, too. What kind of lawyer did you bring in here? Eugene shouted. I've got some bad news for you. He's completely clueless. What's this paperwork I'm supposed to give you? Here's a piece of paper you can wipe yourself with. No insults, please, said George. Maggie looked at both her friend and Eugene, as if dumbfounded. Elsa couldn't look at anyone and just stared at the floor. We don't accept your offer and will be filing documents with the court. Wait for the summons. That's the end of it, George said. Elsa, can I go now? He asked. $10,000 is a lot for you. Eugene shouted after them. If you don't take it, you'll get nothing at all. Don't even think about your half, you naive idiot. Maggie tugged on Elsa's sleeve. Don't even think about listening to him. Come on. A spring breeze was blowing outside, and Elsa stopped in the parking lot to breathe in the fresh air. In that office, she felt like she couldn't breathe at all and was about to suffocate. Elsa took her daughter from Maggie and held her close to her. Don't worry, honey. Mommy will take care of it, she said to Vivian. George came closer. We need to talk about this whole situation. Let's sit down somewhere. Elsa looked around. There are benches over there, come on. We need to strategize. I suggest we draw up a statement and go to court. Do you, Elsa, want to raise your daughter on your own? Of course, she replied. Do you think I can give her to him? All I want is to get my share. We bought the apartment a year after we were married, and we wanted our child to have it. And of course, we've been saving up. Yep. I've been on maternity leave for the last year. But we talked about it. Not only did I want it, but he wanted it too. Unfortunately, agreements are just words, but documents are proof. George sighed. How is it that your husband signed over the deed to himself? I didn't follow it and trusted him, Elsa admitted sadly. I never thought it would turn out like this, Elsa shook her head. Unfortunately, it does happen a lot. George looked her straight in the eye. I have to tell you the truth. If everything is legal, it will be extremely difficult for you to get anything. But I guarantee that we'll do the paperwork and try to get justice. Thank you, Elsa nodded. I know it's all my own fault. I can't even believe it. I wish I could turn back the clock. You can't go back, but you have a future, Maggie said. Everything is going to be all right. She looked at the lawyer. Thank you for your work. Write if you need anything else. George nodded and left. Elsa and Maggie decided to go back to the room to put Vivian to bed. The hotel is only for a week, Elsa sighed. What am I going to do after that? She didn't want to think about it, but the bad thoughts were intruding. All right, Maggie said. But you could get a part-time job picking up bouquets at home. Think about it. What home? Elsa objected. Not if you rent, no, but you could rent a place? Yes, I know it sounds terrible, nodded Maggie. But we'll have to do something. You can't stay in a hotel for too long. You'll have to move somewhere. I'll think about it later, Elsa said. Maybe you should go to a psychologist? Maggie suggested. So many things have come up all at once. I don't know how I'd cope in a situation like this. I don't know, maybe, but not right now. There is something to do, Elsa replied. Good. Then we need a distraction today, Maggie said. Maybe we should get some chips and popcorn and watch a movie. I don't need snotty melodramas right now, Elsa said. But I wouldn't mind watching a horror movie. Then let's go to my place, Maggie suggested, but then she stopped and slapped herself on the forehead. What's wrong? I don't understand, Elsa frowned. I was thinking I'm going to Los Angeles for 6 months, at least Maggie explained, and you can stay at my place for a while, just to pay the utilities. It's a lot better than renting. You don't even have to pay utilities for the first month. The important thing is that you settle in and settle down, and the solution will come. Maggie, I'm too much. I mean, you could rent it out for full price. I'll do that later. But you can stay with me for 6 months, and then we'll see. Elsa was completely confused by the suddenness of it all. Emily showed up right at the store where they had gone to pick out appetizers for the evening. And you're what? Maggie hugged her friend. Don't worry, we'll show him again. How much so? Elsa smiled weakly, wiped her eyes, and threw a couple packs of popcorn and baby juice into the basket. Let's go watch a movie. I need a distraction or my brain is just going to burst from the tension right now. The next day, Elsa received a text message from George's lawyer. Good afternoon, Elsa. I don't have good news. According to the documents, your husband has done everything very cunningly. I'm afraid it will be impossible to get your share. In the contract is your signature with a waiver of any claims. And the apartment, and it all received under the contract of gift. All you can do is file for divorce and alimony. Maggie, Elsa ran up to her friend. Look, finish reading the message. Maggie stood with her lips pressed together and looked at her friend gloomily. I don't even know what to say. When did you manage to sign a waiver? There's no way I can figure that out. He said something about it being easier to formalize, and I felt like everything that was going on wasn't true. It's just a very bad dream, and she's bound to wake up. Reality intruded on that dream in the form of a text message. So happy now. Would have taken your 10,000 and run. That's it from now on. Don't you dare call me. Don't interfere with my life. What about your daughter? Elsa replied immediately. The court will set a schedule. I'll be taking her to my place. That's great. Isn't it? Elsa declared. So I'll raise her, take her to daycare, feed her, clothe her, and do homework with her. And what, he's going to take her away for a couple weekends? That's just swell. What an asshole. Maybe I should try to make it so he can't see her. What does a child need a daddy like that for? Vivian's not guilty of anything. And he is her daddy after all, Maggie remarked. But somehow I don't think he'll take her, Elsa frowned. That girl of his is hardly likely to want to babysit. And I won't trust her with my daughter. That means he'll have to send her away for the duration of Vivian's arrival. I don't think he'd go for that. Yeah, Maggie nodded. It's getting more fun by the minute. I can stay with you as long as I need to, of course. I wanted to go back to LA in a week. Can you bring your stuff? I don't have much here at all. I'll put everything in a suitcase from the closet. Thanks, Elsa shook her friend's hand. You've just saved me. You could have done a fine job yourself. But why, when you can make life easier? So never mind. I hated Maggie sympathized and hugged her friend, then went to make coffee. The days flew by one after another in a hectic rush. The papers, the application, the care of little Vivian, Elsa's daughter. It seemed as if it had just been Monday, but it was already Friday. Sometimes she felt like she couldn't take it. And Elsa, after waiting for her daughter to fall asleep, would sob in her chair for hours. But in some moments the sun peeked out from behind the clouds and gradually a plan emerged. A month had passed since Elsa had returned home and discovered her husband with his mistress. She was still sad about it, but she could breathe freely and even dream. Elsa moved all her and her daughter's things into Maggie's apartment and even managed to set up a home, which was so necessary now for both her and her daughter. Difficult days came when it was necessary to go to court to sign a lot of papers and agreements to talk about something, to explain. Each time Elsa felt like a little girl who had made a huge mistake. When all the litigation ended, the now ex-husband was only to pay alimony. The amount was small, but it was enough to feed herself and her daughter and start looking for a job. I'll spend more on a nanny than I'll earn, Elsa lamented in a message to Maggie. What's the point of that? I'd rather save money and think of something else. Maybe even try to save up a little, Elsa pondered. One evening, that long-awaited idea popped into her head. She grabbed her cell phone and dialed her friend. Maggie, what if I don't go to work and pick up the bouquets myself? You said something about it, but I didn't realize how to do it. Now I'm enjoying it. I can buy some flowers, put together different bouquets from them and take pictures for social media. In case someone buys some. Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about. And you won't need a babysitter. And you have a 2-door refrigerator. There's plenty of room for food and bouquets. Then I'll start right away. I've only managed to save a little, but it's enough. The important thing is that it works. It might not work, Maggie pointed out. But at least you'll know you tried. And that's very important. And by the way, I have news. Max has asked me to move in with him. Can you believe it? I didn't even hint at it myself. Yay. That's great. Congratulations, Maggie. May everything work out perfectly for you. And it will when you start picking bouquets. I'm going to go to the store right now to get flowers. Don't forget to send a picture. Good luck. Before her maternity leave, Elsa used to love what she did. She came to the flower shop before everyone else, changed the water in the vases and collected the first bouquets for those who would come very soon and wanted to choose a gift for their loved ones. Elsa was very much loved in the salon and considered a talented florist. But in the 5th month of pregnancy, she had to go on maternity leave in order to carry her daughter in peace and not to carry heavy armfuls of flowers and vases filled with water. And now, after all this time, she has her hands on flowers again. A graceful bridal bouquet of white roses formed as if by itself. Elsa inhaled their fragrance, took a few photos, and then, without wasting time, posted them to her accounts. Oh yeah, I promised Maggie I'd send it. Elsa remembered and sent her friend a photo of the bouquet. She immediately called back. Hurrah, said Maggie. I will get married, and you will definitely collect a bouquet for me. Why is it all coming to that already? I don't want to get too excited and ahead of things, replied Elsa. But I think Max is thinking of something like that. He's even asked me a couple times how I feel about marriage. Well, it's all about me. Why don't you tell me how you're doing? That bastard never contacted me again. He wrote once, said I'd forgotten about wet wipes and diapers and offered to pick them up. I said let him keep them. He'll definitely need them. Maggie laughed out loud. That's right. We're settling in nicely. Everything is perfect. I can't thank you enough. You're a lifesaver. And Vivian has a nice corner in the back room. I don't know what to do next yet, Elsa admitted. I hope my bouquets will be bought and I can support myself as I used to. You certainly will. You are a master after all. The main thing, do not give up. And as you get used to it, come to Miami, we'll walk, swim and sunbathe. We'll find you a decent man too. I don't think I want a normal man anymore. No abnormal, no man at all, Elsa grinned bitterly. Now I'm just beginning to realize how much I've neglected myself and gotten bogged down in diapers, cooking, cleaning, and catering to anyone's needs but my own. You have no idea how wonderful it is to have croissants and coffee for breakfast, and not to think that this monster needs meat sandwiches, and he eats porridge, but he doesn't want to cook it himself. So I ran around like an idiot, cooking. But he figured it out quickly, and he's been withdrawing the money to his account. I didn't tell you. Turns out he was making a lot more than he said. A lot more. And he'd been saving it all while my maternity pay went to baby and food. But where was he saving it? Into Mom's account. For otherwise all the funds would have been divided in half. I don't know, Elsa replied. They didn't tell me where exactly, and I don't want to know. It's an idiotic situation. I can't tell you how angry I am at that, Eugene. But I learned your lesson too. No signing a piece of paper believing in a bright future. None. I agree, Maggie nodded. I still can't sleep well. Divorce and breakups are painful, unpleasant enough as it is. But when something like this happens, maybe in this case it's for the best though. You know, I'd still be sad for him and suffer. Now I just hate him, and yet it's a strong feeling too, and it hits you. You hate, and he doesn't care there. It's good that you've taken a job. It'll be easier to distract yourself, Maggie continued. And I'd have an affair with someone if I were you. You don't have to get married or even live together. But you're a young and beautiful woman. Believe me, there will be plenty of offers. So be it, Elsa sighed. For now, I only want to work. Except that so far no one writes that he wants to buy a bouquet. If it doesn't work out, I don't even know what I'll do then. Maggie laughed. And you what? How long has it been? Half an hour. Go have some tea and exhale. You'll do fine. Elsa laughed too, either from nerves or from the realization of her own stupidity, and said goodbye to her friend. Vivian was still asleep, and Elsa went to the window, which had a stunning view of the city. At the same moment, the sun peeked out from behind a cloud. Elsa smiled. She didn't feel like crying right now. Maybe Maggie was right and everything really was still ahead of her. But as much as she wanted to believe in miracles, reality kept coming in the form of an empty fridge and purse, a crying daughter wanting a new toy like the girl from the cartoon, and her own reflection in the mirror without cream or good moisturizer. It's been 2 days since Elsa posted a picture of the bouquet and no feedback. But no one has ever placed an order. The good mood given by the new endeavor was quickly replaced by disappointment. I guess I'm a useless, stupid idiot, Elsa scolded herself. How could I have screwed up my life so badly? She made scrambled eggs for breakfast. Her phone rang, but she didn't pay attention, figuring it was another spam message. Or it was Maggie's text, but she could answer her a little later. Elsa took Vivian out of the crib, sat her down on the high chair and gave her porridge, then sat opposite and began to eat her scrambled eggs greedily. Only when the whole portion was eaten, she remembered about the phone and turned it on. A message popped up on the screen. Hey, it's Vince. Remember when we went out to dinner in Miami? I hope you don't mind that I texted you. Just wanted to see how you were settling in. Elsa put the phone down on the table and moved farther away from him just in case. Her heart pounded like crazy. I won't answer him, she thought. I don't want anything ... or I do. At a complete loss, Elsa began to wash the dishes. Water always soothed her, but not now. Suddenly, without even giving herself time to think about what she was doing, Elsa grabbed her phone and answered, Hi, I'm fine. How are you doing? The second she did, she regretted what she'd done and wanted to delete the message, but it was too late. Vince had read it and was typing a new one. I'm good too. I flew into your city the day before yesterday and I'm staying here for work, so I thought maybe you'd like to see me. And then he added, why don't you show me around the city? And Vivian can be brought along. Elsa didn't answer and called Maggie. Her friend didn't pick up right away, and when she did, she sounded overly tired. IZ. Hilarious, Maggie piped up. Hi, I'm on the treadmill, I'm fine. Vince is texting me. He wants me to go out, Elsa said. Oh yeah, Maggie realized, apparently turning off the treadmill as the buzzing in the phone subsided. I forgot to tell you. What was it you forgot to tell me? Elsa asked sarcastically, already knowing what the answer would be. Hey, exclaimed Maggie. But just recently George was in Miami, and Max and I saw him. Did George ask about you? I told him a little, without any details. No big deal. I just told him that you're single now, and he did a really bad thing to you. He seemed kind of upset with you and said he was sorry. You're such a beautiful girl, aren't you? And that's not all, Maggie continued. Then as we were leaving, he asked if I could call or text you. I said I didn't know how you'd react, but it was always worth a try. He liked you, Elsa, back then. And he didn't even mind at all that you had a daughter. Said Vivian was a very sweet girl. Don't be mad at me, please, Maggie begged. I didn't run after him with your number, I swear. He asked for it himself, okay? He's asking if I'm willing to go out with him, Elsa admitted. Wow. Maggie marveled. What did you say? Nothing yet, said Elsa. I don't know. I'd go if I were you, advised Maggie. Like I said, you don't have to marry him, after all. Yes, but taking Vivian along seems odd to me. Well, get a babysitter for a couple hours, Maggie suggested. You definitely need to rest, take a walk, socialize, right? I know a nanny used to leave Vivian with her when I was running to court. She's very reasonably priced. I'll write and see if she can babysit some more. Hurrah, squealed Maggie. Good luck to you. Be sure to tell me later how it went. The babysitter was free, and Elsa finally decided to answer Vince. Can we do it today or tomorrow? Not without Vivian. I've decided to leave her with the nanny. The reply didn't come right away, but when it did, Elsa smiled. I'm glad you said yes. If you can, let's do it today. I'll pick you up at 6. It was a few hours before 6, and Elsa scurried around the room, going through the children's toys and picking out her outfit. Costumes had to be picked up at once. She wanted to look delicate, feminine. Well, these dresses that she had left much to be desired and did not fit at all. And so, when all the contents of the closet were scattered on the floor, Elsa finally came across the dress hanging farthest away, blue, up to the knees. How had she forgotten about it? Elsa immediately tried it on and admired herself in the mirror. She could walk in it without worrying that someone would look askew. At 5 o'clock, the nanny came, and Elsa told her about her daughter's new skills. Don't worry, the nanny assured her. We'll have a great time. Won't we, Vivian? Vivian nodded happily and pulled the nanny to look at the new toys. Elsa finally had time for herself and ran to the bathroom to style her hair and put on makeup. She decided to limit herself to a minimum of makeup, so as not to look too dressy, and in a few minutes she was ready. 5:55. Vince called to see if Elsa could come out now and said he was waiting for her downstairs by the front door. Not believing this was actually happening, Elsa kissed her daughter on the cheek and told her to behave. Then she hurried downstairs. Vince was standing near the door, and when he saw her, he went to meet her. Hi, he said, smiling. I'm glad you said yes. Hi, Elsa struggled to keep from smiling. Vince looked amazing in his light summer suit and, of course, the flowers. These for you, he said, handing her the bouquet. Thank you. They're very pretty. So where would you like to go? I thought we should sit down and have dinner somewhere first, and then we could go for a walk if you wanted to. Especially since it's so warm today. That's a good idea. Let's go. I found a place. I hope you like it. Vince pointed to a gray car parked outside the house and opened the door. Get in. The interior smelled of men's perfume. Vince took the driver's seat and turned on the ignition. How are you doing? Well, I take it Maggie told you. He asked Elsa briefly. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you're doing well. I am now, Elsa nodded. I'm settling down and starting a new life." She glanced at Vince, but quickly looked out the window. "How's it going with you?" "A lot of work." "I didn't come here for nothing. We're starting a new project, so you're not going to New York for a while?" "No, I'll definitely be here for a while. I have to open an office from scratch, get everything up and running." "Great." Elsa nodded, not knowing what else to say. They drove in silence for a while, discussing only minor things. But then Vince stopped the car and said, smiling, "Here we are." He got out and opened the door, holding out his hand to Elsa. "I didn't tell you that you look beautiful, by the way." Elsa blushed and held out her hand in return. "Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that." The cafe was very cozy and quiet. The first awkwardness after the meeting had passed, and Elsa was finally able to talk about her life. Of course, without going into details. "Now I want to go back to floristry," she finished. "It's not easy, of course, but I think I can do it." "Somehow I don't doubt it," said Vince. "Can you show me pictures of your work?" Elsa nodded and found the portfolio page on her phone. Vince flipped through the photos for a few minutes, then pointed to one bouquet of flowers. "Oh, we're going to need these. We can talk about me keeping the order later." "But no," Elsa said worriedly. "You are an acquaintance, but purely to be supportive." "I certainly want to support you, but I wouldn't order anything if I didn't need it. We just want to decorate the hotel lobby with dried flowers. Your flowers will be perfect for us." Elsa was confused. "But then I'd be more than happy to work." "Sure, we'll discuss it later, when you're ready." Vince nodded and added tea from the huge glass teapot. "What are your plans for your life? What are your dreams?" "Well, I want to open my own flower shop someday. It's a long way off now, of course, but I hope it will happen someday." "And you?" Elsa asked. "I've always wanted to travel, but so far I've only been to 3 countries. My work requires my presence, and I cannot leave for a long time. But I believe that one day I will organize my work so that I don't have to come to the office every day, and I will go on a big tour." "That's very cool." Elsa marveled. "What kind of vacation do you like? Active or one where you just lie on the beach?" "Well, you can lie on the beach with a beautiful girl," said Vince, winking. "But active. I like to go to ancient cities and study architecture. You know how many of these houses are still standing, built hundreds of years ago. I guess I'd like to see them all." "Old houses attract me too." Elsa nodded. "I haven't been abroad much, but I've been to Boston. I've been there." "Is it not far from here?" "Yes, it's not far," Vince nodded. "There's a lot to see." "Of course there is," Elsa agreed. "There's an old neighborhood and some historic houses. In fact, it has the oldest apartment building in the country." Elsa found pictures on the internet and showed them to Vince. He almost clapped his hands together. "It looks very interesting. How about we go there together if you like Boston?" "I like it a lot." "But what about Vivian? You can't go without her. It's one thing to leave her with a babysitter for a couple hours." "I wouldn't dream of suggesting that you leave your daughter at home," Vince said with an embarrassed smile. "Of course we'll go with her, but if you agree, then I'm okay with it. Tomorrow." "What is tomorrow, Sunday? Can we make it a trip?" It was amazing how easy and relaxed they were now. At first Elsa was afraid to put an extra word, but now willingly supported the conversation and even agreed to the trip. "I can imagine telling Emily about this," she laughed softly. "I can imagine her sending me selfies of herself with a happy, amazed face. Looks like she was already trying really hard to set us up." The story could go on. "I think Emily was being very modest," Vince grinned. "She just slipped a slip of paper with your number on it into my pocket." Elsa laughed. "I'm kidding," Vince continued. "Actually, I asked for it myself, having had enough of your hints." Elsa and Vince decided to take a walk along the promenade. There was a nice, light breeze outside, and the sun was beginning to set. Vince suddenly took Elsa's hand, and she squeezed it lightly, feeling incredibly happy. If someone had told her on the day she'd broken up with Jason that she was about to meet a wonderful man, she certainly wouldn't have believed it. Like the gallant cavalier he was, Vince hadn't rushed into anything. But Elsa was finally bold enough when he kissed her lightly on the cheek as he walked her home. She looked at him in a way that was impossible to mistake. That look must have given Vince the courage to touch her lips. Tentatively at first, but more and more confidently with each passing second. "Wow," he whispered. "Do you know how great you are?" Elsa lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She didn't want to say goodbye, but her daughter was waiting for her at home. Vince walked Elsa to the apartment door and went downstairs, promising to write. Elsa opened the door and went into the room. The nanny came out to meet her. "I put her to bed," she said quietly. "How did it go?" Elsa asked in a whisper. "Wonderful. Thank you for your work." And the next day, walking through the streets of Boston, Elsa received an order for a bouquet. As soon as she believed in the best, it began to happen, as if by itself. Already back home, Elsa told Emily about it on the phone, and she laughed with joy. "You see, and you didn't believe me. But the important thing is, you know what?" "What?" Elsa asked. "That lawyer Jake texted me today, remember? You're not going to believe this." "What is it?" Elsa became alarmed. "Anyway, he was digging through the files and found a certificate that said you were entitled to money after the divorce." "Really?" Elsa gasped. "Yes. Jake contacted Jason and found out something unbelievable. It turned out he didn't have any more money. The idiot had put it all in his mistress's name." "What do you mean?" Elsa was dumbfounded. "I thought it was on my mom." Turns out it wasn't. And you can imagine, of course, she left him, but took all the money with her. From surprise and shock, Elsa did not immediately find what to say, but still squeezed out. "That's how karma works. Well, it's a shame for him. I'm not even sorry I did it, and I wish him luck." Now she had faith that everything was going to be all right. Life was slowly getting better.